Dorne is a very special land, with a slightly different cultural basis than the rest of Westeros. It was politically apart for a long time. It was also culturally apart because of the Rhoynar and the traditions they brought, but they didn't influence the rest of Westeros so much. George R. R. Martin in an interview from 2012. Dorne stands out among the other kingdoms of Westeros for many reasons. Their culture is vastly different, their people more open-minded, the land itself a harsh desert with small pockets of paradise the people of Dorne call home. A strong and independent people, from fleeing the wrath of old Valyria to being the bane of House Targaryen, being the only kingdom of Westeros not to fall to the Dragon Lords via invasion. 5 times the Iron Throne tried to bring Dorne under its control, and 5 times their endeavours eventually failed, often at huge cost to House Targaryen. It would take hundreds of years for Dorne to join the Seven Kingdoms, and for Aegon's conquest to finally be completed. And when they did so via peaceful means, marriage. Even today, while part of the Seven Kingdoms, Dorne very much is apart from the others and is less integrated into the social structures of Westeros. But that does not mean the Dornish are not powerful political players, with several Dornish women marrying into House Targaryen, and the line of Dragon Kings themselves, thus possessing Dornish blood. The ancient blood of the Rhoynar. In this series, we'll be taking a deep dive into Dorne, its people, its history, and place in the story of A Song of Ice and Fire. Thanks to its sheer geography, Dorne is by far the hottest region of Westeros, with the heat being unbearable to most even during the longest and harshest of winters. While some might argue life on the Iron Islands is harsher, the truth is Dorne and the Iron Islands are not comparable, with both regions facing their own specific challenges that make them harsh and difficult places to live. But it's not a coincidence that these two very different kingdoms have both created deeply independent and proud people. The region is rocky, mountainous, arid, dry, and features the only desert on the continent. Given this, most travellers coming from the lush green kingdoms to the north struggle to deal with the stark difference in climate, one side of the Red Mountains to the other. Dorne is bordered by the Sea of Dorne to the north, which possesses a few small islands, with Cape Wrath and the Yronwood, the southernmost point of the Stormlands, the other side of the bay. The island chain known as the Stepstones, to the east of the Arm of Dorne, marks the only way in and out of the narrow sea and are vital shipping lanes. But the Stepstones themselves are not controlled by Dorne, or House Martell for that matter, and are often a pirate-infested hellhole, controlled by one of the 3 daughters, or on occasion, the Iron Throne itself. In effect, if you control the Stepstones, you control trade and shipping in and out of the narrow sea. The Summer Sea lies to the south, with its ports and towns often visited by traders coming to and from places such as Old Town, Lannisport and the Iron Islands, and many of the free cities of Essos and the Summer Islands, all wanting to trade. While these aren't the end destinations, they are stops along the way to pick up water and supplies. The southern coast is about 400 leagues long, riddled with cliffs, whirlpools and hidden shoals, with very few safe landings. It makes sailing this coastline much more challenging than most would imagine, with many ships being sunk or lost by overconfident captains. Many snakes, scorpions and sand dogs live in Dorne, but there is also lots of aquatic life such as sharks and the rumoured krakens that infest the seas south of Dorne in the Summer Sea and the Sunset Sea. You may burn us, my lady, but you will not bend us, break us, or make us bow. This is Dorne. You are not wanted here. Return at your peril, Princess Elia Martell, to Rhaenys Targaryen, Fire and Blood, Aegon's Conquest. Dorne's rivers are a vital part of its people's survival, as they provide just enough fertile land for people to farm, and even during long summers there is enough rain and other supplies of water to keep Dorne just about habitable, if not exactly comfortable. By far the most valuable resource in Dorne is inland water, with some even prizing it more than gold itself. It's not uncommon for wells to be generously guarded. The major Dornish river is the Greenblood in southeastern Dorne, which is formed by the Vaith and the Scourge near God's Grace. The trading port called Plankytown is located at the mouth of the Greenblood along the Summer Sea. The Brimstone in southern Dorne flows past the infamous seat of Howhold into the Summer Sea. The Torrentine has its source high up in the Red Mountains of western Dorne and ends at Starfall along the Summer Sea near the borders with the Reach and Old Town. The Will flows across the Boneway in northern Dorne to the Sea of Dorne. There is also a known river in northern Dorne which flows near Yronwood to the Sea of Dorne, but its name has not yet been used in published materials. Any river is not just a vital resource to the greener kingdoms to the north, it's their lifeblood. Given the climate of Dorne, this is double the case here, where their importance cannot be understated. Most Dornish rivers are in full flood only after the rare and dangerous rainstorms. The rest of the year they are mostly dry gullies. In all of Dorne, only 3 rivers flow night and day, winter and summer, without ever running the risk of going dry. The Torrentine, arising high in the western mountains, plunges down into the sea in a series of rapid waterfalls, howling through canyons and crevasses, with a sound like the roar of some great beast which gives it its name. Rising from mountain springs, its waters are sweet and pure, but dangerous to cross save by bridge, and impossible to navigate by boat. In contrast, the Brimstone is a far more placid stream, but its cloudy water stinks of sulphur, and the plants that grow along its banks are strange, stunted things. The men who live along the banks live out a hard life. The Greenblood's waters, if sometimes muddy, are a healful for plants and animals alike, and farmers and orchards grow beyond the riverbanks for hundreds of leagues. Moreover, the Greenblood and its vassals can be navigated by boat almost to their sources, if you somehow manage to avoid the moving sandbars up and down the river. Thus, the Greenblood therefore serves as principally a chief artery for trade. Like Dornish food and Dornish lore, Dornish speech was spiced with flavours of the Rhoyne, but a man could comprehend it. The Thoughts of Tyrion Lannister, A Dance with Dragons, Chapter 1, Tyrion 1. Running across north and then southwest is the mountain range known as the Red Mountains, given its name by their red hue. The mountains separate Dorne from the Stormlands to the north and the Reach to the northwest. The mountains are just as harsh as the desert themselves, steep, rocky, and with many twisting paths easy to lose your way. Most of the smaller passes are known only to the locals, but there are 2 major, larger passes, known as the Boneway and the Prince's Pass, which go through the Red Mountains to the Dornish marches of the Stormlands and the Reach. The Prince's Pass leads to Nightsong, while the Boneway leads to Summerhall. Most of Dorne south of the Red Mountains is just an arid wasteland. Most would be mad to try and traverse it unaided. Eastern Dorne largely consists of dry, stony soil, ill-suited for agriculture, while Western Dorne contains deserts of red and white sand. The Lords of House Vaith, for instance, are known as the Lords of the Red Dunes, while nobles of old who settled desert oasis called themselves the Lords of the Well. Given the climate of Dorne, it doesn't have many large towns, with those it does possess being located in more temperate areas beside the coast or rivers. Given that, it also lacks what you would call a true city. While there is the Shadow City located in the south of Dorne, below Sunspear, the seat of House Martell, the rulers of Dorne, it does not compare to the true cities in the kingdoms to the north. It does have a sizable population with plenty of markets, pillow houses and drinking dens, but in truth, it's not much more than a large, dusty town. Remember, she is Dornish. In the Reach, men said it was the food that made the Dornishmen so hot-tempered, and their women so wild and wanton. Fiery peppers and strange spices heat the blood. She cannot help herself. The Thoughts of Aris Oakhart. Feast for Crows, Chapter 13. The Soiled Knight. Archmaester Brood, who was born and raised in the Shadow City that huddles beneath the crumbling walls of Sunspear, once observed that Dorne has more in common with the distant north and the Iron Islands than it does with the realms that lie between them. One is hot, the other's cold, yet these ancient kingdoms of sand and snow and sea are set apart from the rest of Westeros by history, culture and tradition. They cling stubbornly to their own laws and traditions. None of them were ever truly conquered by the dragons of House Targaryen. Harrenhal was effectively a river king, while the king in the north accepted Aegon Targaryen as overlord peacefully, whilst Dorne resisted the might of House Targaryen valiantly for almost 200 years, before finally submitting to the Iron Throne through marriage. Dornishmen, the Ironborn and Northmen alike, are derided as savages by the ignorance of the so-called 5 civilized kingdoms, and celebrated for their valour by those who have crossed swords with them in battle. For the most part at least, the Dornish proudly like to boast that theirs is the oldest of the 7 kingdoms. In some regards this is true, but it's stretching the reality of history somewhat. Unlike the Andals who came later, the first men were not seafarers and had little in the way of technology. They came to Westeros not on longships, but afoot, over the land bridge from Essos, the remnants of which exist today only as stepstones and the broken arm of Dorne. Walking and riding the eastern shores of Dorne would inevitably have been where they first set foot upon Westerosi soil. In this respect, you can argue they are the oldest of the kingdoms of Westeros. Garth liked to plant his seed in fertile ground, they say. I should wonder that more than his hands were green, Olenna red wine, to Sansa Stark, A Storm of Swords, Chapter 6, Sansa 1. As you would of course expect given their lack of technology, few of the first men chose to remain in Dorne, for the land they encountered was far from welcoming. The children of the forest who inhabited Westeros before the coming of the first men called Dorne the Empty Land, and for good reason. The eastern half of Dorne is mostly made up of barren scrub, its dry, stony soil yielding little, even when irrigated by later more advanced settlers, and once beyond Vaith, western Dorne is nothing but an endless vast sea of flowing sand dunes, where the sun beats down relentlessly and without mercy, giving rise from time to time to savage sandstorms that can strip the flesh from a man's bones within minutes. Even Garth Greenhand, the legendary First Men King, could not make flowers bloom in the environment so harsh and unforgiving as Dorne, if the tales told in the Reach can be believed. But some have suggested, given the enmity between Dorne and the Reach, this tale was always meant to belittle the Dornish, and Dorne's own legends make no mention of Garth at all. Instead they claimed he led his people through the mountains to the fertile Reach beyond, which is where the legend of him being able to make flowers bloom comes from, with it being metaphorical, meaning he led his people through Dorne to a land where flowers bloomed. Most of the first men who came after him took one look at Dorne and followed, yet not all. Some there were who stayed and saw the beauty in this stark, hot, cruel land, and chose to make their homes there. Most of them settled along the banks of the river they named the Greenblood, though meagre when compared to the likes of the Mander, the Trident, or the Blackwater Rush. The waters of the Greenblood are truly the lifeblood of Dorne. Most first men who chose to remain in Dorne, the determined few that is, instead of wandering north in search of sweeter lands, settled close to the banks of the Greenblood and other smaller rivers across the whole of the kingdom, digging canals and deep ditches to bring life-giving water to the trees and crops they planted. While this method of irrigation and farming was nowhere near as close as effective as the kingdoms to the north, it did work, and allowed the first men to call Dorne their home. Others preferred to dwell beside the narrow sea, with the eastern shorelines of Dorne more forgiving than the southern, due to the way in which the winds blow and the weather patterns favour. Soon, many small villages arose, sustaining themselves on fish and crabs from the narrow sea. Some of the first men settlers were even bolder than those who stayed close to the riverbanks or coastlines. The more relentless of the first men pushed onwards and made homes for themselves in the foothills of the Red Mountains. What they discovered were the storms moving north were on occasion dropping their moisture, creating a fertile green belt in the desolate land. Those who climbed farther took refuge among the peaks, in hidden valleys and high mountain meadows, where grass was green and sweet. Only the bravest and maddest dared to strike out inland across the deep sands. A few of these did find water amongst the dunes, and raised holdfasts and castles on those oases. Their descendants, centuries later, became the Lords of the Wells. But for every man who stumbled upon a well, 100 must surely have died of thirst beneath the blazing Dornish sun. Dornishmen are notoriously stubborn, Your Grace. Prince Quinton's forebearers fought your own for the better part of 200 years. Barristan Selmy to Daenerys Targaryen, A Dance with Dragons, Chapter 50, Daenerys 8. It quickly became clear that the first men who settled Dorne had split themselves into 3 distinct groups of people, each with their own culture and way of life, but all still distinctly Dornish. So much so, these 3 distinct types of Dornishmen we know today trace their roots back to these original settlers. While the Dornish have their own names for each of these groups, King Daeron I Targaryen, the Young Dragon, gave them the names that they are known by today in a book he penned called The Conquest of Dorne. Stony Dornishmen, Sandy Dornishmen, and Salty Dornishmen he named them. The Stony Dornishmen were the mountain folk, fair of hair and skin, mostly descended from the First Men and the Andals. The Sandy Dornishmen dwelled in the deserts and river valleys, with their skin burned brown beneath the blazing Dornish sun. The Salty Dornishmen of the coasts were dark-haired, with olive skin, and have the queerest customs and the most Rhoynish blood. When Princess Nymeria came ashore in Dorne, most of the Rhoynar preferred to remain close to the sea that had been their home for so long, even after Nymeria had burnt their ships. By the modern era, in Dorne, descent from the Rhoynar is strongest amongst the three people groups in the Salty Dornish, and they left their mark across the whole kingdom. The Rhoynar were a slender people with smooth olive skin, black hair and dark eyes. The impact on the Dornish gene pool is strongest along the coast with the Salty Dornish, and grows fainter further inland. It's also believed that Dornishmen with more Andal and First Men blood are larger and fairer than those with more Rhoynish blood. Dornish culture has First Men and Andal origin, but much of the elements have been lost over time and is now strongly influenced by the mass immigration of the Rhoynar, who settled Dorne during the Rhoynar migration. Their influence can be observed in the many Dornish customs that are distinctly different from the rest of Westeros, including the likes of the laws of inheritance. In Dorne, unlike the other 6 kingdoms, no distinction is made between sons and daughters. Instead, children inherit in order of birth regardless of gender, as per Rhoynish custom. In the case of an inheriting female, her last name will be passed on to her children, instead of the name of her husband. Furthermore, views on bastardy are much milder in Dorne compared to the rest of Westeros, especially when a child is born to a paramour. The Dornish are not greatly concerned if a child is born in wedlock or out of it. Many lords and some ladies in Dorne have paramours, and homosexuality is more accepted. Typically, like most of Westeros, the Dornish follow the faith of the Seven. However, we know there are several temples of R'hllor located in Dorne, with a small number following the Red God. The Dornish speak in the common tongue, as does the rest of the 7 kingdoms, but unlike in the other kingdoms, their speech is marked by the influence of the language of the Rhoynar. This influence can be found all over Dorne, but most strongly among the Salty Dornish, who, as we've said, have the most Rhoynish blood. They speak with a Dornish drawl, stretching, rolling, and littering some words. Some describe the Dornish speech as charming, while others, such as the Marcher Lords, often claim they find the Dornish accent impossible to understand. The Dornish climate favours loose layered robes. Dornish nobles tend to wear robes of linen, satin, silk, or samite, accessorized with jeweled belts. Dornish armour is heavily enamelled and inlaid with burnished copper, shining silver and soft red gold, with cloaks over it to keep the sun off. Similarly, it is Dornish fashion to wrap helmets in a long scarf, to prevent the sun from beating down upon it and heating up the helmets and burning the skull below when crossing the deserts of Dorne during daytime. Veils are also used to keep sand out of faces, but even these are useless against the worst of the sandstorms and heat. Dornish prefer spicy food, particularly snake sauce, with a drop of venom in it, as well as mustard seeds and dragon peppers. They produce their own wines, often known as Dornish Reds. They are generally sour, though they occasionally can be more rich in taste. Strong wines from Dorne are as dark as blood, with a sweet taste, and are valued across the world into the deepest parts of Essos. They were a people of the Dawn Age, the very first, before kings and kingdoms. In those days, there were no castles or holdfasts, no cities, not so much as a market town to be found between here and the Sea of Dorne. There were no men at all. Only the children of the forest dwelt in the lands we now call the Seven Kingdoms, Maester Luwin to Bran Stark. A Game of Thrones, Chapter 66, Bran 7. Arguably one of the most important and defining events in Dornish history, and maybe all of the history of Westeros, as it shaped how it would develop for generations to come, is one about which we know far too little, other than the fact it occurred. Most of what we know of the breaking of the arm of Dorne comes from legends and songs passed down for endless generations of men. While the first men were the first humans to settle Westeros, it does not mean that Westeros was not inhabited before them. In fact, there are several other elder races who called the land home, land the first men, with their very different customs and lifestyle, were inevitably going to encroach on sooner or later. What we can say with a level of certainty is that the first men crossed from Essos to Westeros by walking or riding across through the hills and forests of the great land bridge that connected the two continents during the Dawn Age. This land bridge is believed to have started in the disputed lands between Myr, Lys, Tyrosh and Volantis, and ended where the eastern coast of Dorne, known as the Broken Arm, lies today. Thus, when the first men first came to Westeros, Dorne was where they entered, but given the harsh conditions of Dorne, few remained to make it their home. When the first men arrived in Dorne, given even the elder races did not inhabit the harsh deserts, calling it the empty land, the first men may very well have assumed the whole of this new land they had come to was likewise empty. Of course, this was not the case. Some 12,000 years ago, the first men appeared from the east, crossing the broken arm of Dorne before it was broken. They came with bronze swords and great leathern shields, riding horses, Maester Lewin to Bran Stark, a Game of Thrones chapter 66, Bran 6. Most of the first men pressed on northwards through the Red Mountains, and may perhaps across the salt marshes that once existed where the Sea of Dorne lies now. As the centuries passed, they came in ever-increasing numbers, claiming the Stormlands and the Reach and the Riverlands for their own, eventually reaching the Vale and the North. As they claimed more land and drove north, they came into contact with the elder races, especially the Children of the Forest. They drove the elder races for them, slaughtering giants wherever they found them, hewing down weirwood trees with their bronze axes, making bloody war against the peaceful Children of the Forest. Eventually, the children did begin to fight back as best they could, but the first men were larger and stronger, riding their giant horses clad and armed in bronze, overwhelming the elder races wherever they met, for the weapons the children made were of bone and wood and dragonglass. Finally, driven by sheer desperation, the children turned to a tool the first men could not, sorcery, and besieged their greenseers to stem the tide of these invaders. And so they did. They gathered in their hundreds. While we cannot know for sure where, it's heavily speculated they did so at the Isle of Faces, at the very centre of the God's Eye in the Riverlands, a place powerful with the old gods even today. There they called upon the old gods with song and prayer and grisly sacrifices. Some versions of the tales say that 1,000 captive first men were fed to the weirwood trees on the isle. Another version of the tale claims that the children used the blood of their own young, which in turn caused their population to fall into a death spiral, ending in their apparent non-existence south of the wall today. Whatever power the children called upon, it apparently worked. And the old gods stirred, and giants awoke in the earth, and all of Westeros shook and trembled. Great cracks appeared in the very earth, and the hills and the mountains collapsed and were swallowed up. And then the sea came rushing in, and the arm of Dorne was broken and shattered by the force of the water, until only a few bare rocky islands remained above the waves, forming the island chain we now know today as the Stepstones. Some songs have given the event the name the Hammer of the Waters. The warm summer sea joined the cooler waters of the narrow sea, and the bridge between Essos and Westeros vanished for all time. It is believed that the joining of the seas might have impacted the climate in some way, and is why the Stormlands have become famous for its storms. The Stepstones, the key chain of rocky islands between Dorne and the disputed lands of Essos, had long been the haunt of outlaws, exiles, wreckers and pirates. Of themselves, the islands were of little worth, but placed as they were, they controlled the sea lanes, to and from the narrow sea, and merchant ships passing through the waters were often preyed on by their inhabitants. The writings of Archmaester Dayne, Fire and Blood, Heirs of the Dragon, A Question of Succession. This is what the songs and legends of the first men tell us. Most scholars do unanimously agree that Essos and Westeros were once joined. 1,000 tales and runic records tell us of the crossings of the first men. Today, the sea divides them, so plainly, some versions of the events the Dornish call the breaking must have occurred. Did it happen in the space of a single day as part of some apocalyptic cataclysm, as the songs and legends would have it? Was it the work of the Children of the Forest and the sorcery of their greenseers? These things are less certain, and we will never truly know. Archmaester Cassidy suggests elsewhere in his tome, Song of the Sea, How the Lands Was Severed, that it was not the singing of the Greenseers that parted Westeros from Essos, but rather what he called the Song of the Sea, a slow rising of the waters that took place over centuries, not in a single day, and was caused by a series of long, hot summers, followed by short, warmer winters that melted the ice in the frozen lands beyond the Shivering Sea, which caused the oceans to rise. Or perhaps some kind of similar event in unknown lands to the south or to the west of Westeros, as who knows how far the endless sea goes and what lies beyond. Many maesters in the modern era, since the coming of the Andals and later House Targaryen, find Cassidy's arguments plausible and have come to accept his view widely. But whether the breaking took place in a single night or over the course of centuries, there can be no doubt that it occurred. The stepstones and the broken arm of Dorne give mute to the eloquent testimonies to its effect. There is also much to suggest that the Sea of Dorne was once an inland freshwater sea, fed by mountain streams and much smaller than it is today, until the narrow sea burst its bounds and drowned the salt marshes that lay between. Even if we accept that the old gods broke the arm of Dorne with the hammer of the waters, as the legends claim, the Greenseers sang their songs far too late to stop the damage that was already done by the first men. While no more wanderers came to Westeros after the breaking, it's true, for the first men were no seafarers. So many of their forebearers had already made the crossing that they now outnumbered the dwindling elder races almost 3-1 by the time the hammer of the waters occurred. And that disparity only grew in the centuries that followed, for the women of the first men brought forth sons and daughters at a much greater frequency than the females of the elder races, and thus the children and the giants faded, whilst the races of men spread and multiplied, claimed the fields and forests for their own, raising villages, forts, and the kingdoms we know today. Some 12,000 years ago, the first men appeared from the east, crossing the broken arm of Dorne before it was broken. They came with bronze swords and great leathern shields, riding horses, Maester Lewin to Bran Stark. A Game of Thrones, Chapter 66. Bran 7. The Dornish, even from our earliest sources, the likes of the runes of the first men, have always been a fractious and disjointed group of people. But there is a very clear reason for this, with it all stemming from the land of Dorne itself. Due to the harsh environment, you have to travel great distances between each small pocket of settlement, crossing burning sands and rugged mountains. All this helped to isolate each community that formed in early Dorne from the others, and led to a rise of several petty lords, whom in time grew large enough to call themselves kings of those same petty kingdoms. It is true that the petty kings during the age of the first men were common, and indeed did exist throughout all of Westeros, seldom so many and so petty as the Dornish kings under the first men. It's factually impossible to name them all, as so many have been lost to time, and of those we do know of, for the most part, their kingdoms were small even by petty kingdom standards. But there are a handful of these kingdoms that do warrant such mention. Those whose lines put down deep roots and endured for thousands of years to come, some of whom are part of the great houses of Dorne we still see today. The wielder of Dorne is always given the title of the Sword of the Morning, and only a knight of House Dayne who is deemed worthy can carry it. The writings of Andal, the world of ice and fire, Dorne, the Andals. At the mouth of the Torrentine, a fast-moving river near where Dorne borders the Reach and Old Town in the west, House Dayne raised its castle on an island where that roaring, tumultuous river broadens to meet the sea. Not only was this a good strategic location for the castle, but the river moves so fast, people unaware of its power often get swept away. Old legend says the first Dayne was led to the site when he followed the track of a falling star, and there he found a stone of magical powers. His descendants ruled over the western mountains for centuries thereafter as kings of the Torrentine and lords of Starfall. North and east beyond the great gap in the mountains that provides the shortest and easiest passage from Dorne to the Reach, House Fowler carved its own seat into the stony slopes overlooking the pass. Skyreach, that seat became known for its lofty perch and soaring stone towers. At the time, the pass it brooded over was commonly known as the Wide Way. Today we name it the Prince's Pass. So the Fowlers took for themselves the grandiose title of Lord of Skyreach, Lord of the Wide Way, and Kings of Stone and Sky. In a similar vein, far to the east where the mountains run down into the Sea of Dorne, House Yronwood established itself in the high valleys and green foothills below the peaks, and seized control of the Stoneway, the second of the two great passes into Dorne, one that's far steeper, narrower, and more treacherous than the Wide Way of the west, but still one of the very few ways through the Red Mountains. Well protected and comparably fertile to the rest of Dorne, their lands were also timbered and possessed valuable deposits of iron, tin, and silver, making the Ironwoods the richest and most powerful of the Dornish petty kings. While their wealth is dwarfed by that of the kingdoms to the north, it was significantly more wealthy in comparison with their Dornish rivals. They took to styling themselves the Blood Royals, Lords of the Stoneway, Masters of the Green Hills, and High Kings of Dorne. The Lords of House Yronwood in time did indeed rule northern Dorne, from the mountain domains of House Will to the headwaters of the Greenblood, though their efforts to bend the other Dornish kings to their will were seldom successful. But they are, for all intents and purpose, our first claim to be High Kings of Dorne. A second rival High King of Dorne also existed during the times of the First Men, ruling from a great wooden moat and bailey castle on the south bank of the Greenblood, near Lemonwood, where the river flows into the Summer Sea. There was a curious kingship, for whenever a king died, his successor was chosen by election from amongst the dozen noble families that had settled along the river or eastern shores. The Wades, the Shells, the Holts, Brooks, Holes, Lakes, Brownhills, and Briars all threw up kings, who ruled from the high hall amongst the lemon trees. But in the end, this curious system broke down when a disputed election set the royal houses to warring against one another. After generations of conflict, 3 of the old houses were wiped out, and the ones powerful enough saw the river realm shattered into a dozen quarrelsome petty kingdoms. Many rightly compared this custom to the much more successful King's Moots of the Iron Islands. While it too did die out as a practice, its uses lasted till much later than the River Kings in Dorne. Some argue that due to the fractal nature of these kings of the rivers, it's hard to view them as true High Kings of Dorne the same way as you can the Ironwoods. But it does seem the Ironwoods were much more politically stable as a kingdom than that of the houses of the Greenblood. There were of course other small kingdoms that existed elsewhere in Dorne, in the deep sands, amongst the high peaks, along the salt shore, and on the isles and the Broken Arm. Few of these ever approached the power and prestige of the Danes of Starfall, the Fowlers of Skyreach, and the Wide Way, and the Ironwoods of Ironwood, and they have mostly been forgotten in the pages of history. The oldest histories we have were written after the Andals came to Westeros. The First Men only left us runes on rocks, so everything we think we know about the Age of Heroes and the Dawn Age and the Long Night comes from accounts set down by septons thousands of years later. There are archmaesters at the Citadel who question all of it. Samwell Tarly to Jon Snow, A Feast for Crows Chapter 5, Samwell 1. Just like the First Men before them, the Andals also left their mark on not just Westeros south of the Neck, but the whole of Dorne as well. But many maesters do agree that their impact was much less pronounced in Dorne when compared to the other southern kingdoms. Unlike the First Men, the Andals were much more technologically advanced, with iron armour and weaponry, but most importantly, they were a seafaring people, and the more adventurous of their captains knew the Dornish coasts well, and were wont to say that there was naught to be found there but snakes, scorpions, and sand. So it's a small wonder that a comparatively few of the invaders bent their oars southward, when there were richer, greener lands far closer at hand, just across the narrow sea from Andalos itself. There is always a few who walk the roads the others shun, seeking after fortune in the bleaker corners of the world. And so it was with the Andals who made their way to Dorne. Some contested with the First Men, who had come before them, for choice lands along the Greenblood and the coasts, or ventured into the mountains. Others established themselves in places where no man had dared go before them. Amongst these were the Ullers and the Qorgyles. The former raised a grim, stinking seat beside the sulphurous, yellow waters of the Brimstone River, whilst the latter established themselves amidst the dunes and deep sands, fortifying the only well for 50 leagues around. Farther east, the Vaiths raised a tall, pale castle in the hills, at the juncture of the two streams that form the river soon to bear their name. Elsewhere in the realm, the Allerons and the Jordanes and the Santagars carved out holdings for themselves. And on the eastern shore, between the Broken Arm and the Greenblood, the Andal adventurer named Morgan Martell and his kin descended on lands loosely held by House Wade and House Shell, defeating them in battle, seizing their villages and burning their castles, and establishing dominion over a strip of stony coastland 50 leagues long and 10 leagues wide. Over the centuries that followed, their strength grew, but slowly, for then and now the lords of House Martell were renowned for their caution, until the coming of Nymeria. No Dornishman would ever have counted them among the great powers of Dorne. Indeed, though surrounded by kings on every side, the Martells themselves never presumed to claim that title. At a certain point in their history, they willingly bent the knee to the Jordan kings of the Tor, the pious Allerons of God's grace, the many petty kings of the Greenblood, and the mighty Ironwoods of Yronwood. Sunspear is the seat of House Martell and the capital of Dorne. The large castle is located on the Broken Arm, north of the Greenblood, on the far southeastern coast of Westeros, and is surrounded on 3 sides by the sea, and by the Shadow City on the 4th side. The Palace of the Water Gardens lies 3 leagues away on the coastal road, and is technically considered part of Sunspear and the Shadow City. Before Sunspear, the ancient seat of House Martell was known as Sanship. By most accounts, it was a small, squat and run-down keep. It should, however, be noted that at this time House Martell was still considered a minor house. When Nymeria and her 10,000 ships arrived in Dorne, fleeing the wrath of Valyria in 700 BC, she married Lord Morse Martell, the then Lord of Sanship. This marriage led to the formation of the new house, House Nymeria Martell, an alliance between the Dornish and the Rhoynar. So powerful was this match, it led to Nymeria's wars, and the unification of Dorne under House Martell. The seat of the ruling prince and princess of Dorne became Sunspear, the castle which developed around Sanship. It was named after the union of the Martell spear with the son of the Rhoynar. It contains beautiful towers built in the Rhoynish fashion, such as the Spear Tower and the Tower of the Sun of the Old Palace. The winding walls of the castle were also built around 400 BC. I thought you were the Rhoynar, you Dornishmen I mean. We are in part, your grace. Nymeria's blood is still in me, along with that of Morse Martell, the Dornish lord she married. On the day they wed, Nymeria fired her ships so her people would understand there could be no going back. Marcella Baratheon and Elia Martell, A Feast for Crows, Chapter 21, The Queenmaker. By the modern era, Sunspear has become a huge walled settlement, protected by 3 massive winding walls, encircling one another and containing miles of narrow alleys, hidden courts, and noisy bazaars. The threefold gate, where the gates are lined up one behind the other, avoids this labyrinth, instead allowing straight passage on a brick path to the old palace. Of course, it should be noted that these gates are always heavily guarded, day and night, given the security threat they could potentially provide. The oldest part of Sunspear remains the original keep, the Sanship. Over time, the new towers in the Rhoynish fashion were built in and around the old keep. 2 of the key towers are the tall and slender Spear Tower and the domed Tower of the Sun. We know that the Spear Tower is at least 150 feet high and has often been used to house noble or high-value prisoners. The Tower of the Sun, on the other hand, is the location of the high seat of the Martells. Unlike the other great seats of Westeros, they are in fact 2 twin seats. One with the Martell spear inlaid in gold, the other a blazing Rhoynish sun. The towers are so large, they are often the first thing a visitor sees of Sunspear when approaching by land or sea. There are even some wives' tales which claim on a clear day you can see the towers from the peaks of the Red Mountains. But we can safely say this claim is just that. On the side of Sunspear that doesn't face the ocean, spreading westward, lies the closest thing the Dornish have to what you would call a true city, a place that has become known as the Shadow City, given it sits in the shadow of Sunspear itself. Closest to Sunspear's walls, mud brick shops and windowless hovels can be found. Stables, inns, wine sinks and pillow houses are found west of those, with walls of their own. More hovels have been built aside those walls, which in turn has led to the city becoming a labyrinth of narrow alleyways, homes and bazaars. I will not fight you, Princess Mira told Rhaenys, nor will I kneel to you. Dorne has no king. Tell your brother that. I shall, Rhaenys replied. But we will come again, Princess. And the next time we shall come with fire and blood. Elia Martell and Queen Rhaenys Targaryen. Fire and blood, Aegon's Conquest. Sunspear would prove to be a key political location during the reign of House Targaryen, very much thanks to how the Dornish resisted Targaryen rule for centuries. During the Conquest itself, Queen Rhaenys Targaryen confronted Princess Elia Martell at Sunspear, but she refused to surrender, and Rhaenys retreated from Dorne, given the Dornish lords were hiding in secret locations rather than fighting and defending their keeps. Thus, you cannot beat a foe you cannot fight. When the conquest itself was all said and done, King Aegon could focus his full attention on Dorne in what became known as the First Dornish War. Again, much like the conquest, the Dornishmen abandoned their castles, allowing House Targaryen to take them without a fight. The difference is this time, House Targaryen was here to stay, and thus garrison the castles. Princess Mira vacated Sunspear before the arrival of King Aegon and Queen Rhaenys, who found the Shadow City half abandoned as well. Within Sunspear's Great Hall, Aegon declared that Dorne was now part of the realm ruled by the Iron Throne, and he named Lord Jon Rosby as Warden of the Sands and Castellan of Sunspear. After Aegon returned to King's Landing, however, Dorne immediately rose up in rebellion. The Dornishmen swarmed in from the Shadow City, and Jon Rosby was killed in the recapture of Sunspear. Lord Harlan Tyrell would march east from Hellholt to retake the castle, but his host disappeared in the Red Sands of Dorne, never to be found. Later in the war, in 9 AC, during the 2 years of the Dragon's Wrath, a Targaryen rampage of revenge for the death of Rhaenys Targaryen at Hellholt, Targaryens burned Dornish castles all over Dorne with dragonfire, with the exception of Sunspear. It's speculated by Archmaester Timothy that the Targaryens did so to encourage House Martell's bannermen to turn against their overlords. Ultimately this failed, and the Dornish remained loyal. Daemon Targaryen was only 14 when he conquered Dorne, a conquest that lasted a summer. Your boy king lost 10,000 men taking the place, and another 50 trying to hold it. Someone should have told him that war isn't a game. Jon Snow and Benjen Stark, A Game of Thrones Chapter 5, Jon 1. In 133 AC, Lord Alan Velaryon visited Sunspear several times during his voyages to the Sunset Sea to confront Dalton Greyjoy, Lord of the Iron Islands, in the wake of the Dance of the Dragons. Alliandra Martell, the Princess of Dorne, welcomed Alan during his stay. Dalton Greyjoy, the so-called Red Kraken, threatened to sack Sunspear, but he was killed at Faircastle before Alan arrived in the west to confront him himself. When Alan stopped at Sunspear during his return from the west, he again was greeted fondly by Alliandra. Drizzenko Rogaire, an envoy to Dorne from the Free City of Lys, informed Alan that his brother Lysandro held the vanished Prince Viserys Targaryen, second son of Rhaenyra Targaryen and Daemon Targaryen, who had been missing since the Dance of the Dragons. Alan sailed from Sunspear to Lys to negotiate the prince's return to Westeros. Drizzenko eventually married Alliandra, but the envoy choked to death on bacon at Sunspear during the Lysene Spring. Some believed he was in fact assassinated by either his wife or the Faceless Men. Around 158 AC, during King Daeron I, the young dragon's conquest of Dorne, Rickon Stark, the son of Cregan Stark, Lord of Winterfell, was killed in a battle outside of Sunspear in one of the final battles of the conquest of Dorne. The Dornishmen surrendered to King Daeron in what became known as the submission of Sunspear, but they rebelled in the following years. Daeron's successor, King Baelor I Targaryen, walked barefoot from King's Landing to Sunspear in the hopes of forging a peace with Dorne. Dorne eventually joined the Seven Kingdoms during the reign of King Daeron II, through the marriage of his sister Daenerys to Maron Martell, the Prince of Dorne, in 187 AC. A portrait of Princess Daenerys still hangs in the halls of Sunspear to this day. During Robert's rebellion in the years 282 to 283 AC, Elia Martell was killed at the Battle of the Trident, and Elia Martell was murdered in the sack of King's Landing. Lord John Arryn, the new hand of the king to King Robert Baratheon, personally travelled to Sunspear after the war to return Lewin's bones and secure a peace with Prince Doran Martell, a task that many feared would not be possible, given that Elia was his sister, and many Dornishmen and Dornish lords were angered at her murder on the supposed orders of Tywin Lannister. There was in fact much dissatisfaction when Doran did make peace. During the timeline of the main book series, during a Feast for Crows, Princess Myrcella Baratheon, a ward of Prince Doran Martell and betrothed to his son, Trystane Martell, has quarters in the Tower of the Sun. It is also believed that the Kingsguard Knight Sir Aerys Oakheart, whom is the protector of the princess, also has quarters somewhere in Sunspear. Later, following the death of his brother, Prince Oberyn Martell at the hands of Sir Gregor Clegane in King's Landing, Prince Doran orders Aerio Hota to round up the Sand Snakes, Oberyn's bastard daughters, with the oldest of the girls confined in the Spear Tower, and the younger ones at the Water Gardens. After plotting to crown Myrcella as queen, Princess Arianne Martell, Doran's heir, is imprisoned for some time within Sunspear, with Doran later releasing her and the older Sand Snakes from the Spear Tower. Currently, this is all we know of Sunspear from the published material. That is Nymeria's star, burning bright, and the milky band behind her, those are the 10,000 ships. She burns as bright as any man. And so shall I. Arianne Martell's Thoughts, A Feast for Crows, Chapter 21, The Queenmaker. The origin of many of the Dornish houses stand out as unique, none more so than that of House Nymeria Martell of Sunspear. Not only is the founding of the house very different to most, but the manner in which it functions as a hereditary lordship and later a principality. During the timeline of the main book series, they are the rulers of Dorne, using the title Prince or Princess of Dorne, and they were an independent kingdom for much of the Targaryen era of Westeros. The Martells of old used a spear as their emblem, while Nymeria and her Rhoynar used the sun as theirs. When Nymeria wed Lord Mors Martell, the symbols were combined into a golden spear piercing a red sun on an orange field. Their words are Unbowed, Unbent, Unbroken. For most of Dornish history, they stuck to those words. In appearance, they are what King Daeron I considered salty Dornishmen, with dark eyes, dark hair, and olive skin. From what we know, the house in its earliest form was founded by an Andal adventurer known as Morgan Martell, sometime during the Andal invasion of Westeros thousands of years ago, with Morgan being one of the few Andal lords to brave the harsh sands of Dorne. He settled between the mouth of the Greenblood River and the broken arm of Dorne itself, in a very strategically valuable position. At first they were merely vassals to several petty kings, until Morgan led the defeat of his local rivals including the likes of House Wade and House Shell, thus growing his own personal holdings to a strip of land 50 leagues long and 10 leagues wide. Morgan was not so bold to name himself a king, however, cautious at the attention that would bring from the other great Dornish kings, the likes of House Jourdain, Alaron, and Yronwood. While House Martell grew and took time to consolidate their new position, Morgan felt it best not to rouse the ire of any of those who he may see as a rival. The prince and the princesses of House Martell have always had a reputation for their caution and planning, a trait that seems to go all the way back to the founder of the house itself. I thought you were Rhoynar, you Dornishmen I mean. We are in part, your grace. Nymeria's blood is in me, along with that of Mors Martell, the Dornish lord she married. On the day they wed, Nymeria fired her ships, so her people would understand there could be no going back. Myrcella Baratheon and Arianne Martell, A Feast for Crows, Chapter 21, The Queenmaker. The fates and fortunes of the early Martells would forever change with the coming of Nymeria and the Rhoynar in the year 700 BC. During the time of the Rhoynish Wars, House Martell was still one of the lesser families of Dorne, with their land dwarfed by that of House Yronwood. The Rhoynar fled Essos and the wrath of Old Valyria under the leadership of Nymeria. They did so in 10,000 ships, which would be their home for the next few years, running from safe harbour to islands and lands unknown, through successes and tragedies, until one day they came ashore on the coast of Dorne. House Martell was the then Lord of House Martell, who was ruling his meagre strip of land from a run-down keep called Sandship. He saw an opportunity in the arrival of the Rhoynar. He took Nymeria to wife, but this would be more than a normal Westerosi marriage, as Nymeria was more than an equal in status to House Martell himself. They would rule together. Combining their strength, the two managed to unite all of Dorne under their rule in what became known as Nymeria's Wars. The union of these people saw the Martells abandon many of their older Andal customs in favour of those of the Rhoynar. Nymeria named Mors Prince of Dorne instead of King, and their lands and titles were passed down to their eldest child, their daughter, regardless of Nymeria marrying again after Mors' death, or giving birth to a male child. The Lordship of Dorne would always pass to the eldest regardless of gender. The new seat of House Martell, Sunspear, was built in the Rhoynish way, especially the Spear Tower and the Tower of the Sun, and that was only the start of the Rhoynish influence over Dorne as a whole. The campaign of Nymeria and Mors to conquer Dorne took years to accomplish, as they had to defeat numerous lords and petty kings in quick succession. Although the Martells gained support of the Fowlers, Tolans, Daynes and Ullers, for 9 years Mors battled the last and greatest opponent, King Yorick V Yronwood, whose support included the Jordanes, the Wills, the Blackmonts, the Qorgyles. Although Yorick slew Mors in the Third Battle of the Boneway, Nymeria continued the war and eventually forced the Ironwoods into submission after another 2 years. By war's end, Nymeria had sent 6 kings to the wall: Yorick Ironwood, Vorin Dayne, Garrison Fowler, Lucifer Dryland, Benedict Blackmount, and Albin Manwoody. You may burn us, my lady, but you will not bend us, break us, or make us bow. This is Dorne. You are not wanted here. Return at your peril. Elia Martell to Rhaenys Targaryen, the world of ice and fire, the reign of the dragons, the conquest. While House Martell has its own unique place in history, one of its defining factors is in fact its relationship with House Targaryen, dating back to Aegon's conquest itself. During the conquest, it was Queen Rhaenys Targaryen who was sent to deal with the Dornish. Finding no battles in Dorne, as the fighting men had vanished like ghosts, Rhaenys confronted the aged Princess of Dorne, Elia Martell, at Sunspear. The princess refused to submit to House Targaryen. The Targaryens returned in 4 AC, starting the First Dornish War, in order to complete Aegon's conquest. When their forces arrived at Sunspear, after a long drawn-out war, Mira had vanished, with most of the Dornish fighting men with her. King Aegon and Queen Rhaenys declared themselves victorious, and left Lord John Rosby as Castellan of Sunspear as they returned to King's Landing. However, the Dornishmen quickly came out of hiding, retaking Sunspear. Lord Rosby was captured and thrown from a window atop the Spear Tower by Princess Elia Martell herself. In latter phases of the war, the Targaryens burned every Dornish stronghold at least once, with the exception of Sunspear itself and its Shadow City. Archmaester Timothy has suggested that King Aegon had hoped to turn the other Dornish houses against the Martells by leaving them as the only ones unharmed. A letter has been discovered in which the Marcher Lords claimed to the Dornish that the Martells had brought their safety. Regardless, this tactic did not work. After 9 bloody years, the First Dornish War came to an end in 13 AC, at great cost to both House Martell and House Targaryen. The Dornish had lost thousands of men, and in 9 AC, Queen Rhaenys Targaryen herself was shot down and killed over Hellholt. It came to an end when the elderly Princess Mira died. Her son Nymor assumed rule over Dorne. He desired peace, so he sent his daughter Daria to King's Landing as an envoy. She brought with her the skull of Rhaenys' dragon Meraxes, and a personal letter from her father, Prince Nymor. After much deliberation, King Aegon eventually agreed to a peace deal, after reading Nymor's letter, the contents of which is unknown to this day. During the remainder of King Aegon's reign, the Martells and Targaryens remained on mostly good terms. In 23 AC, King Aegon and his son and heir, King Aenys, visited Sunspear for a feast of friendship, celebrating the 10th anniversary of the peace accords with Princess Daria, now ruling Dorne after the death of her father. In 37 AC, a man known as the Vulture King troubled the lands surrounding the border between Dorne and the Iron Throne. Princess Daria insisted to King Aenys that she was doing all she could to end this rebellion. Many suspected, however, that she was secretly giving the rebels her support. This is what's officially known as the Second Dornish War. For the most part, things would remain peaceful between the Targaryens and Martells during the reigns of both King Maegor the Cruel and King Jaehaerys. However, in 61 AC, King Jaehaerys and Lord Rhogar Baratheon would lead men into the Red Mountains of Dorne to once again put down another Vulture King in what officially became known as the Third Dornish War. House Martell's role in the rise of this new Vulture King is again not entirely clear. By 83 AC, Prince Morin Martell was resentful that his father had allowed King Jaehaerys to encroach into the Red Mountains during the Third Dornish War without any punishment, and thus decided to invade the Stormlands. When Prince Morin was ready to attack, he sailed his spearmen to Cape Wrath to begin his invasion. But the Fourth Dornish War consisted of a single battle and lasted all but a day. King Jaehaerys and his two eldest sons, Prince Aemond and Prince Balon, awaited the Dornish on their dragons, Vermithor, Caraxes and Vhagar, whilst Lord Bormund Baratheon was waiting on the shoreline for the Dornish with his army. As the Dornish fleet was sailing north across the Sea of Dorne, Jaehaerys and his sons struck first, descending from the skies with their dragons. Though the Dornish responded by firing the air with scorpion bolts and crossbows, none of the projectiles pierced the dragon's scales. Dragonflame destroyed the Dornish fleet. The arms of House Martell displayed the sun and spear, the Dornishmen's two favoured weapons. But of the two, the sun is more deadly. They are on the first Targaryen, on the Conquest of Dorne, a feast for Crows chapter 21, the Queen Maker. In 110 AC, Prince Qhorin Martell led Dorne to join the Triarchy in the war against Prince Daemon Targaryen for control of the island chain, the Stepstones. At some stage after this, King Viserys I Targaryen considered marrying his daughter and then assumed heir, Princess Rhaenyra, to the Prince of Dorne, and thereby in theory bringing Dorne under the control of the Iron Throne. But Rhaenyra eventually would marry Sir Laenor Velaryon instead. At the outbreak of the Dance of the Dragons in 129 AC, at the death of King Viserys, both sides of the war sought Dorne as potential ally, but remembering the devastation of the First Dornish War, Prince Qhorin chose to reject both sides. Rhaenyra's faction was co-led by Prince Daemon, who had recently been fighting against the Dornish, but the opposing faction of Rhaenyra's half-brother, King Aegon II, including Dorne's ancestral enemies in the Stormlands and the Southern Reach. Therefore Dorne would remain neutral throughout the dance, and content to sit back and watch House Targaryen destroy itself. Prince Qhorin would die in 132 AC, and was succeeded by his 17-year-old daughter, Alliandra Martell. Dorne's power only grew during her reign, as the Targaryen kingdom to the north was left badly weakened after the Dance of the Dragons. Alliandra encouraged her knights and lords to prove themselves with renewed raids into the Dornish marches. Eventually, conflict in the Stepstones flared up once again when the Triarchy collapsed in the chaotic Daughters' War between 131 and 134 AC. Alliandra actively sought to expand Dorne's influence east there as well. Towards the end of that war, Alliandra allied with Tyrosh and Lys against the other factions, competing over the region, and when the dust had settled at the war's end, Dorne ended up in control of almost all of the Stepstones, for a brief period of time. In 133 AC, Lord Alan Velaryon stayed at Sunspear as a guest of the princess while dealing with Lord Dalton Greyjoy, the Red Kraken of the Iron Islands, who continued his raids into the Westerlands despite the end of the Dance of the Dragons. It seemed Lord Alan was a guest at Sunspear several times over his life, and he had a close relationship with Alliandra. King Daeron I Targaryen, in effect, would conquer Dorne in 158 AC for a brief moment when the Prince of Dorne bent the knee at the submission of Sunspear, but rebellion continued until Daeron's death. Only a few years later, with the death of his brother, the Iron Throne would pass to King Baelor I Targaryen, also known as Baelor the Blessed, whose first act as king was to grant pardon to all the Dornish hostages taken during the Conquest. He walked barefoot from King's Landing to Sunspear, personally escorting the hostages, who rode on fine horses, back home. The Prince of Dorne and Baelor came to an agreement regarding a peace. As part of the terms of the agreement, Baelor agreed to betroth his young cousin, Daeron, to Princess Elia Martell. As both were still young children, the marriage would take place later into Baelor's reign. House Martell is ancient and noble, and has been a loyal friend to House Targaryen for more than a century, Your Grace. Barristan Selmy to Daenerys Targaryen. A Dance with Dragons, Chapter 50. Daenerys 8. Prince Daeron would inherit the Iron Throne in 184 AC and ascended the Iron Throne as King Daeron II Targaryen. One of his earliest significant acts after assuming the throne was to begin negotiations to unify Dorne under Targaryen rule. Negotiations lasted 2 years, but eventually Daeron and his brother-in-law, Prince Martell, now the ruling Prince of Dorne, reached an agreement. Maron was betrothed to Daeron's younger sister, Princess Daenerys. When they were wed in King's Landing in 187 AC, Prince Maron knelt before the Iron Throne and swore oaths of fealty, placing Dorne under Targaryen rule. Due to the peaceful negotiations and unification, the Martells were allowed to continue using the title Prince of Dorne, unlike their lordly counterparts in the rest of the Seven Kingdoms, which angered many of the ancient great houses, whom used to call themselves kings. They additionally had won several concessions during negotiations, resulting in significant rights and privileges for the Dornish lords that other houses did not have. Additionally, Dornish influence at the royal court at King's Landing only grew. All of these concessions resulted in dissatisfaction among some lords, and was one of the seeds from which the First Blackfyre Rebellion eventually grew. However, the rebellion, in some ways, would help integrate Dorne and House Martell into the fabric of the Seven Kingdoms even more, as, during the First Blackfyre Rebellion, Prince Baelor Targaryen, the eldest son of King Daeron II and Queen Elia Martell, commanded hosts from Dorne and the Stormlands, these two ancient enemies united under one banner. He would achieve a decisive victory in the Battle of the Red Grass Field. Without the Dornish support, it's likely the war could have been much more in balance than it ended up being. Justice is in short supply this side of the mountains. There has been none for Elia, Aegon, or Rhaenys. Oberyn Martell to Tyrion Lannister. A Storm of Swords, Chapter 66. Tyrion 9. We know that Dorne closed itself off during the Great Spring Sickness in 209 AC, which minimized its impact in Dorne. It is believed it was around this same time that Prince Aegon, the future King Aegon V, would have been travelling to Dorne as the squire to the Hedge Knight Sir Duncan the Tall. We know that the mother of Prince Doran Martell had served at the Targaryen court as lady-in-waiting to Princess Rhaella Targaryen prior to inheriting the rule of Dorne. This may be the first case we know of where an heir to Dorne served at the Targaryen court in this capacity. In 273 AC, the princess took her younger children, Oberyn and Elia, to meet potential suitors. The final destination was Casterly Rock. Despite learning of Lady Joanna Lannister's death while at Oldtown, they continued their journey. Oberyn believed that his mother had planned with Joanna to marry either Elia or Oberyn to one of Joanna's twins, Jaime and Cersei, since there was an empty cabin on their ship meant for someone of high birth. Lord Tywin Lannister ignored them for weeks. When the Princess of Dorne eventually broached the subject of marriage to him, both matches were brusquely refused. He claimed that Cersei was meant to marry Prince Rhaegar Targaryen, and suggested the newborn dwarf Tyrion for Elia instead, which was taken as a serious insult. Shortly thereafter, at the age of 16, Oberyn was caught to bed with Lord Edgar Ironwood's paramour. The two would fight a duel, in which both took wounds. Edgar's wounds festered and killed him, causing rumours that Oberyn's blade in the duel had been poisoned. To mark peace between the two houses, Oberyn was temporarily exiled. The princess would eventually betroth her daughter Elia to the Crown Prince Rhaegar Targaryen, turning the tides on an angered Tywin Lannister. In early 280 AC, The now Prince Doran Martell saw his sister wed to Rhaegar at the Great Scepter Baelor in King's Landing. Later that same year, Elia would give birth to her first child, a girl named Rhaenys. Her second child, Aegon, was born the new year of 282 AC. However, Rhaegar disappeared with Lyanna Stark, one of the events which would spark Robert's rebellion. Prince Doran Martell was furious about the way his sister had been treated by Rhaegar and House Targaryen, and thus consequently he was slow to lend any aid in the war. Doran did eventually agree to send 10,000 Dornishmen to fight the Loyalist army under the command of his uncle Lewin Martell of the Kingsguard, understanding that Elia, as the wife to the crown prince, would one day become queen, and that her son Aegon would one day be king. However, Rhaegar was killed at the Battle of the Trident, as was Doran's uncle, Lewin, who was a member of the Kingsguard. King Aerys II Targaryen was convinced that Lewin had betrayed Rhaegar on the Trident, and refused to send Elia and her children to Dragonstone, alongside his own wife and his new heir, Prince Viserys. Not long after the sack of King's Landing, Elia and her children were brutally killed by the men of Tywin Lannister. Prince Doran was left furious after the new King Robert Baratheon proved to be accepting the deaths of Elia and her children. Doran's younger brother, Oberyn, sent messages all over Dorne in an attempt to raise rebellion for Prince Viserys Targaryen in the years after Robert's rebellion. Lord Jon Arryn, Hand of the King, travelled to Sunspear to return Prince Lewin's bones. There he spoke with Doran, ending all talk of rebellion. During the reign of King Robert Baratheon itself, Prince Doran and House Martell has very much kept themselves to themselves, staying away from larger-scale Westerosi politics, but some say there is a deep resentment within Dorne to this day about the murder of Elia Martell, and the talk of rebellion and revenge is always simmering under the surface. The wielder of Dorne is always given the title Sword of the Morning, and only a knight of House Dayne who is deemed worthy can carry it. The writings of Maester Yandel, the world of ice and fire. House Dayne of Starfall is a noble house from Starfall in Dorne. They are among the principal and most powerful houses sworn to House Martell. Their banner is a white sword and a falling star crossed on a lavender background, referencing the house's ancient origin. There also exists a cadet branch of the house, made up of landed knights, House Dayne of High Hermitage. However, we don't know how old this branch is or anything about their origins. The Danes are among the most striking of the Dornish houses and stand out among their fellow Dornishmen, given they originate from the western side of the Red Mountains. Under King Daeron I's classifications of the Dornish, House Dayne would be considered among the stony Dornish, even if they do not necessarily physically resemble most Dornishmen, let alone the stony. Their hair has often been described as pale blonde, sometimes dark, or even silver with streaks of black. Some Danes have blue eyes, but purple eyes tend to be the most common. Many take the Danes' silver hair and purple eyes as a sign they have of Valyrian descent, but it's commonly accepted this is not the case, with the sources of the Danes' distinctive look coming from a different place altogether than the blood of old Valyria, as seen in houses such as Targaryen, Velaryon, and Celtigar. Some have put forward that the Danes could have descended from adventurers from the great empire of the Dorne during the Dawn Age of Westeros, but if this were the case, it's unlikely to ever be provable. What I know is that the Danes have been killing Oakhearts for several thousand years. It seems to me that Oakhearts have been killing Danes for just as long. Gerald Dayne and Arianne Martell, Feast for Crows Chapter 21, The Queenmaker. House Dayne are not only one of the most ancient Dornish houses, but one of the oldest in Westeros altogether, claiming descent from the earliest of the first men to cross the land bridge from Essos, while most of their kin would not remain in the hot sands of Dorne. Ancestors of the Danes crossed the Red Sands and headed to the west, where they raised their great seat of Starfall in the mouth of the Torrentine River, on an island sat in the fast-flowing waters. It is said they had followed a falling star, and there found a stone of magical power which became the ancestral sword of House Dayne, Dorne. A sword like no other, made from the very heart of a falling star. It is said House Dayne have wielded Dorne for 10,000 years. The blade is pale as milk glass, unlike the dark Valyrian steel, but similar in strength and sharpness. The coat of arms of House Dayne depict the white sword and the falling star. Unlike other houses who have ancestral swords, House Dayne does not pass it down from lord to heir. Only a knight of House Dayne who is deemed worthy enough can wield Dorne, with the sword of the morning, envied throughout all of the Seven Kingdoms. It's not uncommon for the blade to go unwielded for several generations if there is not a living knight deemed worthy of it. Starfall itself is in a key strategic location near the Red Mountains, very close to the city of Old Town in the Reach. The Torrentine River is famed for its fast-moving waters, with many unsuspecting travellers swept out into the summer sea by its strong currents. This in turn makes Starfall a highly defendable location, very hard to assault, and with the speed of the waters impossible to siege in a conventional way. The key feature of Starfall is the huge tower at its heart, known as the Pale Stone Sword. The blade was as pale as milk glass, alive with light. The thoughts of Eddard Stark. Game of Thrones Chapter 39. Eddard 10. When Dorne was a collection of petty kingdoms, much like the rest of Westeros, House Dayne ruled under the title of Kings of the Torrentine, with their biggest rivals being some of the other powerful petty kingdoms, particularly the kings of House Fowler and House Yronwood. Given that Starfall is located near the border with the Kingdom of the Reach, the kings of House Dayne often warred and raided their neighbours. In particular, several wars with House Oakheart. A King Samwell Dayne, known as Starfire, went so far as to burn Old Town, which given the size of the city even in ancient days, is no easy feat. The last Dayne king, Vorin Dayne, was known as the Sword of the Evening. He was defeated in Nymeria's war by House Martell and sent to the wall to live out the remainder of his days, along with 6 other Dornish kings defeated by House Martell. Afterwards, the Danes would support Nymeria against King Yorick V Ironwood. After the death of her second husband, the aged Lord Uller, a Sir Davos Dayne, who was the Sword of the Morning at the time, married Princess Nymeria and became the Prince Consort of Dorne. The couple had one son together. Nymeria remained unquestioned ruler of Dorne, with Davos only serving as a counsellor and consort. After Nymeria's death, she was succeeded by her eldest daughter, by Lord Mors Martell, rather than her son with Sir Davos, as the Martells had come to adopt the Rhoynish custom of equal primogeniture. During the Targaryen era of Westeros, during the First Dornish War, 10 AC, a Sir Joffrey Dayne raided the Reach alongside House Fowler, who captured and sacked the seat of House Caron, Nightsong. When the heir to the Hightower, Sir Adam Hightower, led a strong host to retake the castle, Sir Joffrey marched from Starfall to Old Town. Unable to breach the city walls, Joffrey had the fields, farms and villages burned for 20 leagues around the city. When Lord Manfred Hightower's younger son, Garmon, led a sortie against Dayne, Joffrey slew the boy. By the time Adam Hightower returned to Old Town, the Dayne army had melted back into the Red Mountains. In a response to Sir Joffrey's attack, Queen Visenya Targaryen and her dragon Vhagar burned Starfall. The extent of the damage is not known. In 47 AC, Lady Clarisse Dayne was suggested as one of the potential wives for King Maegor the Cruel, but was ultimately not selected. It's also believed that Grand Maester Bennifer wanted to detach Starfall from Dorne and add it to the realm of House Targaryen, given its strong defendable position, creating a buffer between Dorne and Old Town, the other side of the Red Mountains. However, nothing appears to have come of this idea. A Sir Ulrich Dayne, a Sword of the Morning, was considered an exceptional knight by Sir Eustace Osgrey, comparable to swordsmen of his age, the likes of Daemon the First Blackfire and Aemon the Dragon Knight, which would have made him one of the best swordsmen in Westeros. The blood of House Dayne not only joined that of House Targaryen, but eventually even ruled the Seven Kingdoms itself. Lady Diana Dayne married the 4th son of King Daeron II, Maekar, with the pair having 5 children: Daeron, Aerion, Aemon, Daela, Aegon and Rhae. Diana would die sometime before 209 AC, before her husband unexpectedly became king. When Maekar died in battle in 233 AC, the throne passed to Diana and Maekar's 4th son, Aegon. Thus, via King Aegon V, All Targaryen kings who followed him had Dayne blood. Even after the downfall of House Targaryen, thanks to the marriage pact between House Targaryen and Baratheon, in which King Aegon V's youngest daughter Rhaella married the Lord of Storm's End, Ormond Baratheon, means that King Robert Baratheon can also claim to carry the blood of House Dayne via his grandmother. Me, that boy I was. When did he die, I wonder? When I donned the white cloak? When I opened Aerys' throat? That boy had wanted to be Sir Arthur Dayne, but someplace along the way he had become the Smiling Knight instead. The Thoughts of Jaime Lannister, A Storm of Swords, Chapter 67, Jaime 8. House Dayne could be viewed as having played a key role in the build-up and during Robert's rebellion. We know that when the Princess of Dorne was looking for a marriage for her two youngest children, Elia and Oberyn, she travelled to Casterly Rock to meet with Tywin Lannister about a marriage to one or both of his children, the twins Jaime and Cersei. Lady Ashara Dayne, the sister of the then Lord of Starfall, travelled as part of this party. Ashara would later become one of the ladies-in-waiting for Elia Martell after her marriage to Prince Rhaegar Targaryen. Thus, she spent much of her time at court in King's Landing. Ashara was described as a young, beautiful, tall and fair maiden with haunting violet eyes. Her long, dark hair tumbled around her shoulders. According to Sir Barristan Selmy, Daenerys Targaryen's eyes resemble that of Ashara. Ashara's brother was Sir Arthur Dayne, who was the Sword of the Morning and the deadliest knight in Westeros at the time. He was a member of the Kingsguard of King Aerys II Targaryen. Jaime Lannister idolized Arthur and recalls that Arthur was stronger and a better swordsman than he ever was. Arthur wielded Dorne as part of his office as Sword of the Morning, carrying it slung across his back. In 281 AC, to defeat the Kingswood Brotherhood, he gained the trust of the smallfolk of the Kingswood by paying for what he and his forces took and taking their grievances before King Aerys II. While Aerys did nothing to help the smallfolk, many were thankful Arthur tried. In the end, Arthur slew the Smiling Knight in single combat and ended the threat of the outlaws. Following that victory, he knighted Jaime Lannister, who would later become a sworn brother of the Kingsguard alongside Arthur. Arthur was also said to be the champion in the tourney to honour the birth of Prince Viserys Targaryen in 276 AC, defeating Prince Rhaegar Targaryen. In another tourney, Arthur was said to have broken 12 lances against Prince Rhaegar, losing to the prince. At the tourney at Harrenhal in 281 AC, he was once again defeated by Rhaegar. How dare you play the noble lord with me? What do you take me for? You've a bastard of your own. I've seen him. Who was the mother, I wonder? Some Dornish peasant you assaulted while her holdfast burned? A whore? Or was it the grieving sister, the Lady Ashara? She threw herself into the sea, I'm told. Why was that? For the brother you slew, or the child you stole? Cersei Lannister to Eddard Stark. A Game of Thrones, Chapter 45, Eddard 12. Ashara Dayne was present at the tourney at Harrenhal in 281 AC, where she danced with knights of the Kingsguard, Prince Oberyn Martell, and Lord Jon Connington. It is said that Brandon Stark, the wild young heir to Winterfell, approached her on behalf of his younger brother Eddard. Ashara would in fact go on to dance with Eddard that night. According to Illyria Dayne, Ashara's younger sister, Ashara and Eddard fell in love at Harrenhal. This is also supported by the fact that Sir Barristan Selmy of the Kingsguard was also in love with Ashara, although he could never tell her so. Barristan recalls that had he won the tourney, he would have named Ashara his Queen of Love and Beauty. According to Barristan, Ashara was dishonoured by a man at Harrenhal. He states that Ashara looked at Stark following the final tilt at the tourney, although he did not identify the Stark in question, giving contextual clues many believe this to mean Eddard Stark. However, Brandon could still be a possibility. It was also at Harrenhal that Prince Rhaegar Targaryen fell in love with Lyanna Stark, and thus the path to Robert's rebellion was open. It is believed that Arthur, along with his other sworn brothers of the Kingsguard, Sir Oswell Went, aided Rhaegar in the kidnap of Lyanna Stark near Harrenhal as the year of the false spring was ending. However, the exact details of this are not fully understood. We cannot say for sure who aided Rhaegar, with it also being possible Lyanna Stark left with Rhaegar willingly. Regardless, Robert's rebellion began shortly after. At the end of the rebellion, Arthur, Oswell and Sir Gerald Hightower, the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, were found by Lord Eddard Stark at the Tower of Joy in the Red Mountains of Dorne. Arthur died there, fighting Eddard and his companions, but the exact circumstances of his death are unclear. The recorded histories describe Arthur as being killed by Eddard in single combat. However, Bran Stark recalls his father describing Arthur as the finest knight he'd ever saw, and elaborated further that Arthur would have killed him if it was not for Howland Reed. Stones from the tower were used to build his grave upon a nearby ridge. After Arthur's death, Eddard rode to Starfall, the seat of House Dayne, to return the sword Dorne to Arthur's sister, Lady Ashara, as a sign of respect. Some have noted this is odd, however, given the distance between the Tower of Joy and Starfall, and the fact Starfall would have greatly been out of Eddard's way. Sometime after Eddard's visit, Ashara jumped from atop Palestone Tower into the sea below, with her body never being recovered. Several characters have suggested that the possible reason for Ashara's decision to commit suicide was a broken heart because of a speculated stillborn daughter, or possibly of a different stolen child, from the man who had dishonoured her at Harrenhal, or simply the grief over Arthur's death. At Winterfell, Eddard Stark's soldiers spread the tale that Ashara was the mother of Eddard's bastard son, Jon Snow. When Eddard's wife Catelyn Tully heard these stories from her maids, she confronted her husband about it, who refused to confirm or deny anything regarding Jon's mother, and subsequently silenced all talk of Ashara at Winterfell. Her name was never mentioned at the castle again. It's believed several other important people across Westeros also believe the tale that Ashara is Jon Snow's mother. However, this is just one of many popular versions of this theory. The squire seemed nice enough to Arya, maybe a little shy, but good-natured. She'd always heard that Dornishmen were small and swarthy, with black hair and small black eyes. But Ned had big blue eyes, so dark they looked almost purple, and his hair was a pale blonde, more ash than honey. The thoughts of Arya Stark. A Storm of Swords, Chapter 43. Arya 8. Travelling through the Riverlands during the War of Five Kings, Arya Stark meets the Brotherhood without banners. She learns that Lord Edric Dayne accompanied Lord Beric Dondarrion in his mission to bring Sir Gregor Clegane to justice. When the band was ambushed at the Mummers Ford, Beric was killed, with Edric defending his body, allowing it to be recovered and later accidentally revived by Thoros of Myr. Edric had accompanied his fellow survivors, forming an outlaw fellowship dedicated to guarding the small folk of the Riverlands from the cruelties of war. At this time, Edric is around 12 years of age. Although he can be shy, Edric is seen as a good-natured and polite person. We learn that Edric attended the Hands tourney at King's Landing and saw Lord Eddard Stark. He wanted to speak to Eddard, given his history with Ashara and Arthur Dayne, but he did not know what to say. He also mentions he saw Sansa Stark at the tourney, when Sir Loras Tyrell gives her a rose. When Arya Stark is taken by the Brotherhood without banners to the Hollow Hill, she sees that Lord Beric has a young squire named Ned, who helps remove his breastplate. She's unnerved by hearing the name Ned, the same nickname as her father. Ned brings Beric his sword, surcoat and shield before he fights a duel with Sandor Clegane. After Beric is killed in the duel, Thoros of Myr has Ned help him with Beric's body before the Red Priest revives the Lightning Lord with the last kiss. Ned fights alongside Beric during the Battle of the Burning Septry, and he accompanies the outlaws to High Heart. Edric attempts to befriend a wary Arya during the Brotherhood's travels, and her friend Gendry is scornful of their interactions. He tells Arya that he saw her father and her sister at the Hands tourney. He also claims he and Arya's half-brother Jon Snow are milk brothers, that his wet nurse Wyler, who had been a servant of House Dayne for many years, was Jon Snow's mother, and swears that it's true on the honour of his house. The theory of Wyler being Jon Snow's mother is another popular theory, alongside that of Ashara, Lyanna Stark, and the fisherman's daughter. When Arya Stark asks who he is, he reveals he is the Lord of Starfall, Edric Dayne. He tells Arya more about his family, and is surprised that her father never spoke of Edric's aunt, Ashara, committing suicide over her broken heart. He hesitantly tells Arya that his aunt Illyria had told him that Ashara and Eddard fell in love at the tourney at Harrenhal. This upsets Arya to hear that her father might have loved someone besides her mother Catelyn. Edric tries to apologise to her, but she doesn't want to hear it and rides away. After Beric's final death, Edric and several other members of Beric's band go their separate ways from those who chose to resurrect the vengeful Lady Stoneheart. You were a fool to make him part of this. Darkstar is the most dangerous man in Dorne. You and he have done us all great harm. Doran Martell to Elia Martell. A Feast for Crows, Chapter 40, Princess in the Tower. During A Feast for Crows, Elia Martell enlists Sir Gerald Dayne of the High Hermitage branch of House Dayne for her plot to crown Myrcella Baratheon. Gerald is in his late 20s and a handsome man with a clean-shaven face and an aquiline nose, high cheekbones and dark purple eyes with a strong jaw. He has collar-length silver hair divided by a streak of midnight black. Despite his beauty and valour, Gerald is a cruel man with angry eyes. He is jealous of his famous cousin, the late Arthur Dayne, who was the Sword of the Morning. He goes by the nickname Darkstar, as a reference to the streak of black in his hair. We do not know exactly when. At some stage, he was the lover of Elia Martell. At Shandystone, Arianne admits to her other conspirators that she only included Darkstar for his fighting prowess and his keep, High Hermitage. Gerald is skeptical of Arianne's plan to provoke Queen Regent Cersei Lannister. Arianne's party is surprised while at the Greenblood River by Ariohotha, who orders them to surrender. Gerald agrees since they are vastly outnumbered, but Myrcella's bodyguard, Sir Aris Oakheart of the Kingsguard, rises to his death in an attack on Ario. Amidst the fighting, Gerald attempts to kill Myrcella, but her horse suddenly rears, and Darkstar succeeds in only slicing off her ear and scarring her face. He escapes Ario's guards by riding into the sands of Dorne. Myrcella is taken to Sunspear, where Maester Carlot saves her life. Arianne ponders whether her plan had been betrayed by Darkstar or by another of her conspirators. Later, in a dance with dragons, Sir Balon Swan arrives at the Sunspear with Sir Gregor Clegane's skull. Under Arianne's instructions, Myrcella has blamed Darkstar, not Ario, for the death of Aris. Arianne's father, Doran Martell, the Prince of Dorne, sends Obara Sand with Balon to hunt Gerald at High Hermitage. Cersei thinks that Darkstar might be the cat's paw of her brother Tyrion Lannister, whom she already blames for the death of her first son, Joffrey Baratheon, and her father, Tywin Lannister. During the Winds of Winter sample chapters, while travelling to the Stormlands, Arianne and Sir Daemon Sand discuss Gerald. Arianne feels that Oberyn and Ario can kill Darkstar. Although Daemon is skeptical, Arianne is regretful for ever trusting him, thinking that he was so handsome she had not believed half the stories told about him. Styling themselves Blood Royals, Lord of the Stoneway, Masters of the Green Hills and High Kings of Dorne, the Lords of House Ironwood, in time ruled northern Dorne, from the mountain domains of House Will to the headwaters of the Greenblood. Though their efforts to bend the other Dornish kings to their will were seldom successful, the writings of Andal, the world of ice and fire, Dorne, kingdoms are the first men. While the other kingdoms of Westeros do tend to have several ancient houses that claim their descent from the earliest of the first men into the Dawn Age of Westeros, Dorne does seem to have a high concentration of them. Some have put forward that the harsh climate of Dorne meant only the best and toughest of these houses survived long enough to carve out lands and later petty kingdoms of their own. House Ironwood of Ironwood is a perfect example of this, and so you can make an argument that the ancient Ironwood High Kings of Dorne were among the most powerful of the petty kings, before Dorne was united as one by Prince Mors Martell and Nymeria after the arrival of the Rhoynar. The seat of House Ironwood is the last fortress defending the Boneway, one of the few passes through the Red Mountains. Thus, this is reflected in their title of Warden of the Boneway. Despite no longer being kings, the current head of House Ironwood still uses the title Blood Royal. Their house words are, "We guard the way," and their banner depicts a black portcullis grille over sand, a very fitting motto and banner given the history of the house. The men and women of House Yronwood are considered to be stony Dornish, who tend to have fairer hair and eyes than that of their Dornish kin. However, there are several exceptions to this rule, with plenty of Yronwoods known to have possessed more traditional Dornish features. The Yronwoods established their seat, the formidable stronghold known as Yronwood, in a strategic position in the foothills of the Red Mountains. The land protected by the castle is fertile and forested, with deep iron, tin and silver ores. Yronwood has clean and sweet mountain air, and the high meadows north of the castle have crisp air and cool nights. It's one of the most hospitable places to live in Dorne. The stony Dornish have the most in common with those north of the mountains, and are the least touched by the Rhoynish custom. This has not made them close allies with the Marcher Lords, or the Lords of the Reach, however. On the contrary, it's been said that the Mountain Lords have a history as savage as the mountain clans of the Vale, having for thousands of years warred with the Reach and the Stormlands, as well as with each other. The writings of Andal, the world of ice and fire, Dorne, kingdoms of the first men. The Yronwoods are considered among the most ancient of the noble houses of First Men descent. The strategic location of their seat granted them control over one of the two major passes that leads into Dorne. The importance and wealth of this territory enabled the Yronwoods to claim dominion over much of northern Dorne as a result, growing larger and faster than most of the other First Men. At the height of their power, prior to the unification of Dorne, House Yronwood controlled lands that extended from Will, the mountain fortress of House Will, to the source of the Greenblood River, the very lifeblood of Dorne itself. On occasion, their lands even encompassed as far as the Sandship, the seat of House Martell prior to the Rhoynish migration, and its conversion to their more well-known seat of Sunspear. Despite their wealth and influence, the Yronwoods, while the biggest of the Dornish kingdoms, were unable to unite Dorne as one, as they could not overcome the other powerful Dornish dynasties, the Kings of Stone and the Kings of Sky, from House Fowler, and the Kings of the Torrentine, from House Dayne. Given their size, House Yronwood are often called High Kings of Dorne by maesters and men of history, a title House Yronwood did proudly claim. But their claim to the title of High King was contested by other noble families in the region, particularly those dwelling near Lemonwood. The location of Yronwood in the southern reaches of the Red Mountains means they are considered among the Border Lords, who often fought and warred with the Storm Lords in the Dornish marches to the north and the Storm Kings of House Doran. The battle by the Bloody Pool was famously fought between King Yoren Yronwood and King Doran the Young, the then Storm King. While details of this battle are lost, we do know that King Yoren was pushed back into the Red Mountains after a long and bloody battle. King Oliver Yronwood was also known for leading multiple raiding parties into the Dornish marches over the course of the reign of King Eric the Sith Durrandon. By the time the Rhoynish arrived in Dorne, under the leadership of Princess Nymeria and her legendary fleet of 10,000 ships, the kings of House Yronwood held dominion over roughly half of Dorne. However, the balance of power shifted dramatically when Nymeria married Lord Mors Martell, the ruling lord of the Sandship. At the time, House Martell were counted among the smaller houses of Dorne. This union significantly bolstered House Martell's military strength, increasing their forces tenfold. Following this alliance, Nymeria proclaimed Mors as the Prince of Dorne, a title that asserted their authority over the entire region, and declared their intention to rule all of Dorne under House Martell. At the time, King Yorick V Yronwood was the Lord of Yronwood and the last king of House Yronwood. The Martells met and subdued all the other petty kings of Dorne until only Yorick V remained. For 9 more years, the Yronwoods warred against the Martells and their supporters. Yorick's own bannermen included the likes of House Jourdain and the Wilds, as well as the Blackmonts and the Qorgyles. In the Third Battle of the Boneway, Yorick V himself slew Prince Mors Martell, with Princess Nymeria assuming command of the Martell armies in her late husband's place. 2 years of bloody battle followed, though ultimately Yorick V was forced to submit and bend the knee to Nymeria, and the Yronwoods became bannermen of House Martell, along with the other fallen Dornish kings. After his defeat, Yorick was sent to the Wall to join the Night's Watch, where he lived out his days. Some would call this mercy from Nymeria, or others a shaming punishment for a once proud king. During Aegon's conquest, specifically the First Dornish War, King Aegon the Conqueror led a brief siege of Yronwood, but like most of the castles in Dorne during the First Dornish War, Yronwood was defended by boys, old men and women, as the fighting men had fled. According to the strategies of Princess Elia Martell, Yronwood was quickly recaptured by Dornishmen after Aegon returned to King's Landing, a matter of weeks after he declared victory. In 130 AC, during the Targaryen civil war known as the Dance of the Dragons, Sir Giles Yronwood, who had been exiled from Dorne, was in the service of Rhaenyra Targaryen, one of the claimants to the Iron Throne. Late into the war, during the storming of the Dragon Pit, Sir Giles was one of the 7 men sent by Queen Rhaenyra to recover her son, Joffrey Velaryon, as he tried to save his dragon from the Dragon Pit. Joffrey was killed after falling off his mother's dragon, Syrax, with a mob tearing his body apart. While trying to recover the boy's remains, Giles was one of the 3 rescuers who was killed in the riot, being pulled from his horse and bludgeoned to death. The Yronwoods joined the Seven Kingdoms in 187 AC, when Prince Maron Martell submitted to King Daeron II Targaryen and the Iron Throne through the marriage of Maron to Daeron's sister, Daenerys. But later, the Yronwoods joined Sir Aegon Rivers against the Targaryens and the Martells in 3 of the 5 Blackfyre rebellions. In the years prior to Robert's rebellion, around 147 AC, a 16-year-old Oberyn Martell, the younger brother of the Prince of Dorne, Doran Martell, was found abed with old Lord Edgar Ironwood's paramours. Although the ensuing duel was only to first blood, both men took wounds. But Lord Edgar's wound festered, and he died shortly after, which is the origin of the rumour that Oberyn Martell had poisoned his blade, earning him the nickname the Red Viper. Oberyn fled to the Free Cities in exile after Lord Edgar's death. To repay a blood debt, Doran Martell later sent his second child, Quentyn, to foster with Edgar's grandson, Lord Anders Yronwood. Quentyn served at Yronwood as a page and a squire, and he chose to be knighted by Anders instead of his uncle Oberyn. Quentyn was smitten with Yenneis Yronwood, but the girl instead married Sir Ryan Alaron. Her younger sister Gwyneth is herself interested in Quentyn. She's described 12 years old, small, scrawny, with dark eyes and brown hair, which sets her apart from much of her house, who would typically have blue eyes and fairer hair. She's clever and quick with her words and her hands. I want to go back to Yronwood and kiss both of your sisters. Marry Gwyneth Yronwood. Watch her flower into a beauty. Have a child by her. I want to ride in tourneys, hawk and hunt, and visit my mother in Norvos. Read some of those books my father sends me. I want Cletus and Will and Maester Kedri to be alive. The Thoughts of Quentyn Martell. A Dance with Dragons Chapter 68. The Dragon Tamer. During the events of A Feast for Crows, Princess Elia Martell fears that the Yronwoods will declare for her younger brother Quentyn instead of herself as heir of their father, Doran, Prince of Dorne. Given the relationship between her younger brother and House Yronwood, Arianne is in fact mistaken, however, as Doran has a very different plan for Quentyn, sending him to Essos, to Slaver's Bay, to propose a marriage between Quentyn and Daenerys Targaryen. There are subsequently sightings of Quentyn and Lord Yronwood's son Cletus at Plankytown. Despite his lazy eye, Cletus Yronwood is considered handsome and always laughing, counted among Quentyn's closest friends. Because Princess Marcella Baratheon was wounded and Sir Aerys Oakheart killed during Arianne's fell plot to crown Marcella as queen, Doran has Anders Yronwood delay Sir Balon Sworn of the Kingsguard at Yronwood by feasting him for a fortnight before he once again leaves for Sunspear, buying Doran vital time. During A Dance with Dragons, Sir Cletus Yronwood is joined by his cousin Sir Archibald Yronwood, accompanying Quentyn Martell in his mission to find and marry Daenerys Targaryen in Essos. Archibald is said to be 6.5 feet tall, broad of shoulder, with a huge belly. He has legs like tree trunks, hands the size of a ham's, and a no neck. He wields a spiked hammer and a dagger, wearing fine gleaming armour. He is said to be a better fighter than Quentyn or Jairus Drinkwater. The Dornishmen were knights, at least in name, though only Archibald Yronwood impressed him as having true steel. Drinkwater had a pretty face, a glib tongue, and fine head of hair, the thoughts of Barristan Selmy. and Archibald Yronwood, A Dance with Dragons Chapter 70, The Queen's Hand. The party's ship, Meadowlark, is ambushed by corsairs off the coast of the disputed lands, where Cletus, Maester Kedry, and Willem Wells are slain. While staying in Volantis, the group struggle to secure passage to Slavers Bay and Marine, as no shipmaster is willing to take them. Archibald proposes trying by way of the Demon Road, but the suggestion is ultimately set aside in favour of Gerris Drinkwater's plan to enlist with the sellsword company, the Windblown, who were heading towards Marine. To conceal their true identity, Archibald adopts the alias Greenguts, and Quentyn assumes the role of his squire, calling himself Frog. In order to better blend in, the trio sells their high-quality armour in Volantis and replaces it with worn gear from the Windblown's own supplies. Later, as Quentyn, Gerris, and Archibald discuss the possibility of deserting the company following the siege of Astapor, they are unexpectedly summoned by the Tattered Prince, the leader of the sellsword company. The captain assigns them to a group of Westerosi merchants who are to feign defection from the Windblown in hopes of joining Daenerys Targaryen. Upon arriving in Marine, the Dornishmen present themselves to Queen Daenerys Targaryen, where Prince Quentyn reveals the true purpose of his long journey. However, Daenerys turns down his proposal of marriage, citing her upcoming union with Haestar Zolora, though she urges the Dornishmen to return home to Dorne. They choose to remain in the city, unwilling to abandon their mission. Following Daenerys' disappearance, Quentyn hatches a foolish and desperate plan to claim one of her dragons, and though hesitant, Archibald and Gerris agree to help him. Disguised as one of the brazen beasts, Archibald dons a bull-shaped mask and uses his warhammer to smash the lock deep within the Great Pyramid of Marine, where the dragons were being kept. The attempt ends in the expected certain tragedy. When Quentyn approaches Rhoygal, the dragon unleashes a deadly blast of flame, mortally wounding him. Archibald tries to extinguish the fire with his bare hands, but to no avail. When the brazen beasts arrive, they find Archibald holding Quentyn's burned and charred body. Overcome with grief, Archibald and Gerris offer no resistance and are taken into custody. Later, Sir Barristan Selmy, acting as Hand of the Queen, visits the two imprisoned Dornishmen. He informs them that they are to be executed for treason. Gerris, bitter and distraught, places the blame on Daenerys, but Archibald calms him. The larger man recounts the events in the pyramid and reveals that Quentyn had promised the city of Pentos to the Tattered Prince in exchange for the Windblown's help with the dragon plot. Hearing this, Barristan senses a chance to turn the situation to their advantage. He offers the prisoners a ship back to Dorne and Quentyn's remains, on one condition, that they deliver a message directly to the Tattered Prince. Barristan wants the Windblown to assist in freeing the Myronese hostages held by the Yunkai, promising them Pentos as a reward, though Gerris protests, pointing out that Archibald's burned hands can no longer wield a sword. Archibald accepts the mission without any hesitation. With quiet resolve, he persuades Gerris to join him. I will crown Marcella at Hellholt, and raise my banners there. The Thoughts of Elia Martell, A Feast for Crows, Chapter 21. The Queenmaker. House Uller of Hellholt is maybe one of the most infamous houses to come out of the scorching sands of Dorne. They have a feared reputation, and have even managed to leave scars on the mighty House Targaryen. Their keep, known as the Hellholt, certainly deserves its name. Located in the middle of the desolate Dornish deserts, on the banks of the toxic Brimstone River. Some have said it's like being in one of the seven hells itself. This isolation has reportedly made the men and women of House Uller impulsive, unpredictable, and ill-tempered. Some might even go as far as saying psychotic or half-mad. So much so, in an insular kingdom such as Dorne, the Ullers are very much seen as apart from your average Dornishman. A Dornish saying says the following: half the Ullers are mad, the other half are worse. Given the historical context we have of the house, might strike truer to home. The arms depict a rayon yellow over crimson. We currently do not have any indication of their house words. House Uller are not counted among the first men to inhabit Dorne during the Dawn Ages of Westeros. Their founder is likely believed to have been a half-mad Andal adventurer whom, rather than staking a claim some more pleasant land along the coastlines or in the hills near the Red Mountains, ventured into the endless red sands of Dorne, where few men dared to explore, where he raised the keep of Hellholt on the banks of the sulphurous Brimstone River. Despite the impossibly harsh conditions, the early Ullers managed to form a way of life in this remote, hellish place, and as the house grew, so did their keep, the Hellholt. We believe the castle got its name after some rival house of the Ullers were invited to the castle, locked inside a chamber within, and burned to death. This is also believed to have been what inspired the name, the Hellholt, and the Uller house arms. The castle is said to be on the larger side, with tall, thick walls, and a tower that at some point staged defensive weapons such as scorpions. Hellholt is also said to have an inescapable foul smell, believed to have come from the toxic sulphuric waters of the Brimstone River. Hellholt does seem to be more than just its keep. While there is currently no written description, there is in fact some indication there is a kind of street system with a small folk population and likely economic activity such as markets. There may also be some small dock on the Brimstone itself, used to bring trade and supplies into Hellholt from other places in Dorne. However, we have very little, and in some cases next to no information about these places and how they fit into the wider keep of Hellholt. After the migration of the Rhoynar from Essos and the marriage of their leader, Nymeria, to Lord House Martell, the Ullers were among those who supported the new house, House Martell, against the kings of House Yronwood during the 9-year struggle that became known as Nymeria's Wars. As history tells us, House Martell did eventually consolidate control over Dorne, but it is likely it could have taken much longer without the support of houses like the Ullers from early stages of the conflict. Lord House Martell would die in battle against King Yorick V Yronwood early into the war, during the bloody Battle of the Boneway. Nymeria would remarry several times over her life, but her second husband was the then Lord of House Uller. Given that House Martell would be following the Rhoynish custom in terms of inheritance, House Martell's eldest daughter with Nymeria would inherit the Principality of Dorne, but it would seem Lord Uller's motivations did not get tested, as he and Nymeria had no children of their own, with Lord Uller seemingly dying prematurely. After the death of Lord Uller, the twice-widowed Nymeria would marry a Sir Davos Dayne. House Uller and Hellholt, as a result, would play a key and important role during what would become known as the First Dornish War, in the wake of the Targaryen conquest of Westeros. Aegon the Conqueror and his sisters had first attempted to invade Dorne during the initial conquest itself, however were not able to do so as the Dornish nobility and army hid in the mountains and deserts, not offering battle. You cannot beat a foe who will not face you. Princess Elia Martell had warned Queen Rhaenys Targaryen that Dorne would not be so easily taken as the kingdoms to the north, a warning that would soon be proven true in 4 AC, when Aegon, with his sisters and Lord Orys Baratheon and Lord Harlan Tyrell, would lead a huge army into Dorne. Harlan Tyrell was tasked with capturing Hellholt, a mission that would soon show the invaders the harsh realities of trying to invade the sands of Dorne. During the sun-baked march to Hellholt, Tyrell lost a quarter of his men and horses, and soon found water supplies fastly running out. The toxic Brimstone River was poisonous to any man who drank it, and whatever fish was taken from the waters were just as toxic. Even wells and several desert oases on the march to Hellholt had been tainted by the Ullers, so Tyrell's army could not resupply. By the time they did reach Hellholt, Harlan Tyrell found the keep abandoned, with no trace of the Ullers or their men. Much like the initial invasion during the Conquest, Aegon found battle few and far between, and quickly captured the empty capital of Dorne, Sunspear. He named Lord John Rosby the Warden of the Sands, and ordered Harlan to remain and defend Hellholt from any Dornish counterattack. But within weeks of Aegon returning to King's Landing, the Dornish fighting men appeared like ghosts from the sands, and retook Sunspear and most of the castles in Dorne. When Harlan Tyrell got word, he marched his army east across the sands from Hellholt, but they vanished in the deserts, never to be seen again. In retaliation for the loss of Dorne, Aegon and Visenya, at one stage burned Hellholt with their dragons. However, the extent of the damage to the keep is not entirely clear. House Uller would deal a huge blow to House Targaryen late into the First Dornish War in the year 10 AC. Queen Rhaenys Targaryen and her dragon Meraxes were shot down with a scorpion bolt as they flew over a tower at Hellholt. The dragon was struck in the right eye. The fall of Meraxes destroyed the tower, and a good part of the curtain wall was also damaged. Damage that is still visible to this day at Hellholt. The exact fate of Rhaenys is not entirely clear. It's most likely that she died on impact with her dragon, but there are some tales that suggest that she survived the fall, albeit badly broken, only to be held as a captive for months in the dungeons of the Ullers, where she was tortured until her death. Most maesters believe this tale to be a creation of the Ullers, used to grow their own renown, as given the speed and flight of Meraxes, the idea Rhaenys could survive that fall that could kill a dragon does not truly make sense. But, regardless, the death of Rhaenys caused what is known as the Dragon's Wrath, one of the bloodiest periods in the history of Dorne, where Aegon and his sisters burned every castle in Dorne twice over, with several members of House Uller dying in the process. It's said the fires burned so hot the sand nearby to Hellholt was fused into glass through the dragon flames of Balerion and Vhagar. The sun-mottled bones of Meraxes would remain on display at Hellholt for some time, until the new Prince of Dorne, Elia Martell, negotiated a peace with King Aegon, and the skull of Meraxes was returned to House Targaryen. In the years after the downfall of House Targaryen and the rise of House Baratheon as the new High Kings of Westeros, the current Lord of Hellholt is now Lord Harmon Uller. His younger brother, Sir Ulrich Uller, and Harmon's bastard daughter, Elia Sand, are among the Dornish nobility that accompany Prince Oberyn Martell, the younger brother of the Prince of Dorne, to King's Landing for the wedding of Joffrey Baratheon and Margaery Tyrell. Ellaria is the long-time paramour of Oberyn, with her being the mother of several of the infamous Sand Snakes, the bastard daughters of Prince Oberyn. Later, the daughter and heir of Prince Doran Martell, Elia Martell, plans to secretly crown Princess Myrcella Baratheon at Hellholt when she first starts planning her coup. She believes that the Ullers will join her cause due to their close connection with her uncle Oberyn, especially after his death during trial by combat in King's Landing. She believes that Ellaria Sand in particular will be hungry for revenge. But Arianne's plan is foiled, and she is confined to a tower in Sunspear. She does briefly consider asking the Ullers for help, but decides this would be too risky. Harmon and his brother Ulrich, as well as Ellaria Sand, are present at the feast held at Sunspear for the arrival of Sir Balon Swan of the Kingsguard, with the skull of Sir Gregor Clegane, the Mountain, the man who had killed Oberyn Martell and murdered Elia Martell during Robert's Rebellion. Both Harmon and his brother refuse to drink when Ricassio raises a toast to King Tommen I Baratheon, as of the publication of A Dance with Dragons. This is all we currently know of House Uller. House Fowler of Skyreach is a noble house from Skyreach in Dorne, located near the Prince's Pass. They hold the title of Wardens of the Pass and watch over the Prince's Pass itself, given how vital it is to the security of Dorne. Some sources suggest that their house words are "Let me soar," with their banner being a hooded blue hawk on silver. The founders of House Fowler were among the early first men to come to Dorne, crossing the land bridge from Essos, rather than carry on travelling north past the Red Mountains into the lush green lands. The early Fowlers made their home near one of the two large passes through the Red Mountains, a passage that led into the Reach, and the area that would become known as the Dornish Marches. Here they raised their seat, Skyreach. Structures all along the pass include the likes of Skyreach, Kingsgrave, and watchtowers like the Tower of Joy. North of the Prince's Pass is Nightsong, the seat of House Karen, one of House Fowler's oldest rivals, with no love lost between the two houses. The Prince's Pass is the more well-travelled and popular of the two passes through the Red Mountains, largely due to it being much wider and not as steep as the Bone Way to the east. From the little we know of Skyreach, we believe it to have been carved from stone, and has at least several tall towers, used to watch over the pass below, hence the castle's name. There is also some suggestion that it's located near a river that flows eastwards towards Yronwood. The Fowlers, over time, became one of the first men kings of Dorne, ruling from Skyreach. They titled themselves, during this era, Kings of Stone and Sky and Lords of the Wide Way, the name of the Prince's Pass, before Dorne was unified under House Martell, and the pass renamed in honour of the Prince of Dorne. Along with the Danes and Ironwoods, the Fowlers were among the most powerful of the Dornish kings, and thus many wars and smaller battles were fought between them and the other kingdoms, each trying to grow their own petty kingdom. Given their location close to the borders of the Reach, Fowlers often warred with the Marcher lords to the north. We know of a King Ferrys Fowler, who led 10,000 Dornishmen through the Wide Way to the Kingdom of the Reach, but they were turned back by King Garth VII Gardener. King Garrison Fowler, known as the Blind King, was the last of the Fowler kings. After the arrival of the Rhoynar in Dorne thousands of years ago, Princess Nymeria married a small local lord, House Martell. The pair over the next decade would seek to unify Dorne under Martell rule in what became known as Nymeria's Wars. It's believed that King Garrison lost his war with House Martell and bent the knee, with House Fowler taking part in several battles against their former bitter foes, the kings of House Yronwood, until House Yronwood too bent the knee. Since then, they have feuded with the Yronwoods, the wardens of the Stone Way east of the Prince's Pass. Garrison was eventually sent to the Wall to join the Night's Watch alongside the other 5 fallen Dornish kings who bent the knee, who was sent to the Wall by Nymeria. More recent members of House Fowler may have too taken the black, as shields displaying hawks have adorned the shield hall of Castle Black for decades. During Aegon's conquest, Dornish spearmen, very likely of House Fowler, guarded the Prince's Pass, but Queen Rhaenys Targaryen, rather than confronting them, flew above them atop her dragon Meraxes. During what would become known as the First Dornish War, fought between 4 and 13 AC, King Aegon the Conqueror and Lord Harlan Tyrell warred against the mountain lords of the Prince's Pass. To deny food and fodder to the invaders, the Dornishmen, including the Fowlers, abandoned their watchtowers, burned what little crops they had, and poisoned every water source along the Targaryen line of march. Aegon was eventually able to replenish his host after reaching the foothills of the Red Mountains, however, and the king then took Skyreach and continued east. After declaring victory at Sunspear, Aegon returned home north through the Prince's Pass. Just as Aegon reached King's Landing, however, Skyreach was retaken by Dornish spearmen. Lord Fowler would then lead a raid into the Dornish marches, taking and sacking the seat of House Carran, Nightsong, carrying off several prisoners, including Lord Carran and his family. Aegon vowed to make Skyreach a second Harrenhal, and used the dragon flames of Balerion the Blackdread against Skyreach. The extent of the damage done is not known, and is likely to have been restored by the time of the main book series. After the death of Queen Rhaenys Targaryen at Hellholt in 10 AC, what became known as the Dragon's Wrath ensued. We know that once again Skyreach was burned by Visenya and Aegon, and that Lord Fowler himself was assassinated after House Targaryen put out a bounty for the heads of any Dornish lord. In the years after Robert's Rebellion, we know that a younger Princess Elia Martell, the daughter and heir of Prince Doran Martell, played with Jane and Jenelyn Fowler in the water gardens near Sunspear, with the girls growing close. The Fowler twins are described as having wispy yellow hair and are very tall. Their father is Lord Franklin Fowler. He is seen as one of the most powerful lords in Dorne, so much so he even has given Prince Doran Martell pause for thought. Arianne believes he would be a strong supporter of hers. During a feast for crows, the Fowler twins are found abed with Nymeria Sand, one of the bastard daughters of Oberyn Martell, when news of her father's death is brought to Nymeria. When Nymeria later pleads with her uncle, Prince Doran, to let her avenge her father's death, she quotes the words of House Fowler in a fashion, asking him to let her soar. While a prisoner in a tower at Sunspear, after trying to crown Princess Myrcella Baratheon queen, Arianne Martell decides to confide with Lord Franklin Fowler, among all other Dornish lords, because of his great power and the traditional rivalry between the Fowlers and the Yronwoods, and the fact Nymeria is close to the Fowler twins. She writes him a letter, but it gets intercepted before Franklin receives it. Later, Doran tells Arianne that he does not trust Nymeria Sand because she's too close with the Fowler twins, and he cannot say who they in turn would confide in. During a feast at Sunspear, Ariohota noted that the Fowler twins are among the Dornish nobility who do not drink in Ricassio's toast of King Tommen Baratheon, which could give an indication of where their loyalties lie. Given the context of the Winds of Winter sample chapters, there is some speculation that the Fowlers will be a large part of the Dornish army marching north through the Prince's Pass, whom plan to join the forces of the supposed King Aegon VI and Jon Connington as they march on Storm's End and plan to take King's Landing. Your father took my hand. I claim yours as repayment. Orys Baratheon to Walter Will, Fire and Blood, the Sons of the Dragon. House Will of the Boneway is a house from their namesake castle of Will in northern Dorne, located at the very edge of the Red Mountains, where the River Will flows into the Sea of Dorne. They are one of the major houses sworn to House Martell of Sunspear, and throughout their history have been sworn to several of the petty kings of Dorne, most notably House Yronwood. According to several sources, they blazon their banner with a black adder biting a heel on yellow. We know very little about House Will's early history, but like many of the houses that make their home in the Red Mountains, many speculate that the Wills have some form of First Men descent. Some even argue the strong and advantageous location of their seat near the Boneway, River Will, and Sea of Dorne also points to First Men origins, given it's highly unlikely this prime area for real estate would have gone unclaimed for thousands of years prior to the arrival of the Andals. While House Will do likely have First Men blood, that does not mean they don't also have Andal descent. As with most houses in Westeros, it's likely Andals married into the house at various points in time. We cannot say for sure, however, if they have any Rhoynish blood, but that does also seem likely. At some time, they had become the northernmost part of the Yronwood king's domain. A Wyler Will was a warrior maid who fought beside Yoren Yronwood against King Doran the Young, the Storm King, at the Battle of the Bloody Pool, but was turned back, with both sides taking heavy losses. A King Yorick V Yronwood was supported in Nymeria's war by his bannermen, including House Will. In turn, when the Yronwood kings bent the knee to Nymeria and House Martell, so did House Will. The importance of the seat of House Will cannot be understated. It is firstly located just east of the Boneway, one of the two passages that run through the Red Mountains, with the other being the Prince's Pass, far to the west. It is said that the Boneway is much more perilous than the Prince's Pass, with its narrow paths, steep inclines and deep crevasses. The Dornish have over thousands of years carved stone steps into the narrow paths of the Boneway, but the climb can still be difficult for many men, and even slower on horseback. The path of the Boneway itself runs north past the River Will and ends at the Targaryen palace of Summerhall in the Dornish Marches in the Stormlands. House Will's location near the Sea of Dorne is just as important as its proximity to the Boneway. The Sea of Dorne is a large sea along the southeastern coast of Westeros. It is bordered to the north by Cape Wrath in the Stormlands, to the west and south by Dorne, and to the east by the Narrow Sea. The River Will and Slane flow into the sea, which has deep blue waters. While not a key trading location, access to the Sea of Dorne is still important for moving supplies around Dorne, especially with some of the most fertile land being within the low foothills of the Red Mountains. Prior to the Targaryen conquest of Westeros, the Sea of Dorne was also an important security factor, as many Storm Kings throughout the ages have been known to have great navies, some even attacking the Dornish themselves, launching from Cape Wrath or from Shipbreaker Bay in the Narrow Sea. Given the Will's location in the Red Mountains, over countless centuries they've often warred with many of the houses north of the border with the Stormlands in the Dornish Marches, conducting hit-and-run raids, carrying gold and captives back across the Red Mountains much like the other houses that call the mountain range home. The Marcher Lords in turn would too often raid into the Red Mountains via the Prince's Pass and the Boneway, with House Will being targeted several times thanks to their proximity. Some accounts do suggest, however, that the Marcher Lords did have a tougher time raiding into Dorne thanks to the terrain of the Red Mountains and the Boneway in particular. Much of the Will raids consisted of attacks on House Dondarrion of Blackhaven, and even some as far as House Connington of Griffin's Roost, if some claims are to be believed. There are some suggestions that in the century prior to the Targaryen conquest, while the Storm Kings were dealing with the advance of House Hoare into the Riverlands, and thus encroaching on the border of the Stormlands, Dornishmen, some of which were likely members of House Will, invaded deep into the southern Stormlands from the Boneway, before eventually being pushed back sometime before the end of the reign of King Argilac Durrandon. The King's hand should have a hand. I will not have men speaking at the King's stump. Orys Baratheon resigning from his office as hand. Fire and Blood, Reign of the Dragon. The Wars of King Aegon I. House Will would play a key role during the First Dornish War against House Targaryen. The then head of House Will was Lord Will. Will ambushed the forces of Lord Orys Baratheon, Lord of Storm's End and Hand of the King, as he tried to assault the Boneway. The cunning Lord Will launched a night raid, raining rocks and arrows and spears from above. In the end, the Boneway was blocked both in front and behind the Stormlanders' line of march, and Orys was captured by Lord Will. He remained a captive of the Wills for years, until King Aegon ransomed him and his men back in 7 AC, for each man's weight in gold. When the captives were freed, however, the Wills had their sword hands chopped off, so they could not be used against Dorne again. It is said that after the release of Orys and the other lords, the war entered a whole new stage, as King Aegon was now intent on revenge. Orys Baratheon also stepped down as Hand of the King, stating that the Hand of the King needed a hand, not the King's stump. According to Maester Andal, Will of Will committed infamous deeds which are still remembered in Thorntown and Old Oak to this day. Archmaester Gildane elaborates on this, saying that Will of Will turned up uninvited to the wedding of Sir John Catherine, the heir to Thorntown, to Alice Oakhart, the daughter of Lord Oakhart, in 12 AC. He murdered Lord Oakhart and most of his guests, forcing Alice to watch as her husband was castrated. Alice and her handmaids were then assaulted by the Will and his men, and sold off to Myrish slavers, never to be seen again. Gildane calls this the most infamous act of the First Dornish War. The son of Lord Will, Walter Will, becomes Lord Will in 27 AC at his father's death. By 37 AC, during the reign of King Aenys Targaryen, Walter was among the handful of Dornish lords that joined the host of the first Vulture King, an infamous Dornish outlaw who raided into the Dornish marches. Walter had heeded the Vulture King's call for true Dornishmen to join his cause against the Seven Kingdoms, despite Princess Elia Martell denouncing the outlaw. As the Vulture King's host grew in size, he divided his strength and marched against Nightsong, the seat of House Dondarrion, and Horn Hill, the seat of House Tarly, while Walter commanded the other half to besiege Stonehelm, the seat of House Swan. Lord Orys Baratheon rode from Storm's End and smashed Walter's host beneath the walls of Stonehelm. Walter was injured and captured during the battle and brought before Orys. As we know, Walter's father had chopped off Orys' sword hand during the First Dornish War, and in retaliation, Orys chopped off Walter's sword hand, then his other hand, followed by both feet. Orys deemed this satisfactory. In 133 AC, during the regency of King Aegon III, the young princess of Dorne, Elia Martell, encouraged Dornish noblemen to raid into the Stormlands, sensing the weakness of Westeros in the wake of the Dance of the Dragons. Sir Stephen Connington pursued a small band of Dornish raiders across the Dornish marches, but rode too far. Ignorant of what lied ahead, he was ambushed and slain by Wyland Will. During the final siege of the Conquest of Dorne by King Daeron I Targaryen, he was attacked and killed under the pretext of a peace banner, and Prince Aemon Targaryen was imprisoned by the Wills. Lord Will then forced the new king Baelor I Targaryen to cross venomous snakes in order to free Aemon. House Will plays a very minor role in the main book series. The Blackadder banner of the house was spotted by Lord Eddard Stark during the Hands tourney during A Game of Thrones. Later, during A Dance with Dragons, the Wills delay Sir Balon's swan for several days by entertaining him with hawking and hunting in the Boneway. Several Wills are later present at the feast when Balon arrives in Sunspear to deliver the head of Sir Gregor Clegane. House Qorgyle of Sandstone is one of the smaller noble houses from Sandstone in Dorne, located in the expansive and inhospitable sand dunes of the western Dornish deserts, a place where few would be mad enough to call home. They are among the main bannermen sworn to House Martell of Sunspear, the rulers of Dorne, under the title Prince or Princess of Dorne. However, like many of the other more minor houses of Dorne, at various times they've also been sworn to one of the many petty kings prior to the migration of the Rhoynar and Martell unification. Their arms are 3 black scorpions over red, but it's unclear where this symbology actually comes from. Some would suspect their role in the death of Lord Lionel Tyrell. However, this seems much too recent to have become their house banner. House Qorgyle are a much newer house than many of their Dornish peers. They do not have any known First Men ancestry, and it appears they were founded sometime during the Andal invasion by an Andal adventurer thousands of years ago, who established their small domain in the unexplored deserts of Dorne in the deep sand dunes. These dunes were unexplored for a reason. Little to no drinking water, barely any wildlife, and impossible to grow any food. Why would anyone, any adventurer, choose to make their seat in such a place? Given the climate of most of Dorne, many of the sought-after places were already inhabited by bigger and more powerful houses, descended from the First Men. Rather than competing with these well-established houses for land and resources, these bold Andal adventurers claimed this uncontested land in the middle of the dunes, and managed to carve out their own way of life. Their seat of sandstone, even by Dornish standards, is a small castle, made of pale stone that blends in with the sand of the dunes. The spot House Qorgyle chose to raise their castle was at the site of the only known well for over 50 leagues. The castle started off as a simple fortified wall around that very well, growing into the seat of sandstone we see today. We in fact know very little about the early history of House Qorgyle, but we do know that by the time of Nymeria's war to unify Dorne under Martell control, the house were bannermen to the ancient First Men kings of House Yronwood, and had been for a very long time. During the war, House Qorgyle would remain loyal to their lords, and supported King Yorick V Yronwood in what proved to be his unsuccessful defence against the might of Lord Mors and Nymeria. King Yorick would in the end bend the knee to Mors and Nymeria. With that, House Qorgyle also bent the knee, and swore loyalty, becoming vassals of House Martell, as they have been ever since. House Qorgyle will play a role during the First Dornish War in the wake of the Targaryen conquest of the kingdoms north of Dorne, the other side of the Red Mountains, in what became known as the First Dornish War. Aegon the Conqueror and his sister wives, Visenya and Rhaenys, attempted to conquer the Dornish. Lord Harlan Tyrell, whom commanded a large army on behalf of the Conqueror, eventually took the seat of House Uller, Hellholt, to the east of Sandstone, after a long and arduous march. Hellholt was just as inhospitable as Sandstone, perhaps more so. By the time Lord Harlan and his men had reached the Hellholt, while they found the castle empty, every well had been spoiled, and every scrap of food taken. Harlan would send out foraging parties to gather supplies, but whenever these foraging parties strayed too far west and closer to Sandstone, they would be cut down by Qorgyle spearmen. Later into the war by 9 AC, Sandstone was among the many Dornish castles burned by Balerion the Blackdread and Vhagar, the dragons of Aegon the Conqueror and Queen Visenya. However, it's unclear just how badly damaged the castle was, or if there was any significant dead, given the other known instances where dragons have let loose their flames on castles. The damage would likely be significant. In the wake of the Dance of the Dragons, in the year 133 AC, the Maiden Days Ball was used to try and find a new wife for the young king Aegon III. Lords and even landed knights from across the whole of Westeros, from the bleak and cold wall in the north to the sand dunes of House Qorgyle, sent their fairest maidens to King's Landing, hoping to catch the eye of the young king. House Qorgyle would send Moria Qorgyle, and like the others, she was presented to King Aegon as a potential bride. The young girl is said to have boldly requested for the king to kiss her. Though given the shy and reclusive character of the king, it meant that Aegon did not respond to this, and thus Moria was not chosen. During King Doran I Targaryen, better known as the Young Dragon's Conquest of Dorne, between 157 and 161 AC, our Lord Lyonel Tyrell was tasked by the king with ensuring the continued submission of the Dornish in the wake of the fall of Sunspear. The then Lord Qorgyle feigned support for House Targaryen, but proved to secretly be loyal to House Martell. While staying at Sandstone, Lord Tyrell was murdered in a bed of scorpions. Maester Gareth suggests in his tome of Dornish history, Red Sands, that Lord Qorgyle arranged Lord Lyonel's murder, with his motives being the subject of much speculation and remain unknown to this day. Some say Lord Qorgyle was slighted, that his earlier show of loyalty to House Targaryen was given little consideration by Lord Tyrell, while others claim his initial support of loyalty to the Targaryens was always part of a treacherous plan he made with his Castellan to earn the trust of Doran and Lyonel. The balance of probability does suggest House Qorgyle was always loyal to House Martell. There is an unnamed member of House Qorgyle who became the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, which is interesting given how few Dornishmen end up at the Wall, so far away from the hot sands of their homeland. Lord Commander Qorgyle entered the Night's Watch sometime before Sir Dennis Mallister, and during his time at Castle Black would send patrols eastwards to Eastwatch by the Sea every third day and west towards the Shadow Tower every second day, which is far more when compared to current standards. This very same Lord Commander Qorgyle once visited Winterfell with an escort of 12 men, including a younger Mance Rayder, the future king beyond the wall, while he was still a member of the Watch. They met with Lord Eddard Stark during the visit. Eddard's sons, Robb Stark and Jon Snow, the future Lord Commander of the Watch, piled up snow about the gates to dump on unsuspecting passers-by. Mance caught them, but did not reveal their prank. After Lord Commander Qorgyle's death, Ser Jorah Mormont was chosen as the new Lord Commander in 288 AC. During the events of A Storm of Swords, a Sir Aron Qorgyle is part of the escorts of distinguished Dornish nobles who accompany Oberyn Martell to King's Landing on behalf of Prince Doran Martell for the wedding of King Joffrey Baratheon and Margaery Tyrell. Sir Aron later helps Oberyn in donning his battle armour for Tyrion Lannister's trial by combat after the murder of Joffrey Baratheon at the Purple Wedding. During the events of A Feast for Crows, Princess Arianne Martell believes that House Qorgyle will aid her in her attempt to crown Princess Myrcella Baratheon as queen, due to their relationship with Oberyn Martell, especially after his death during the trial by combat for Tyrion Lannister, the Hands of the Mountain, Gregor Clegane. As of now, that is all we currently know of House Qorgyle. Dornishmen and Highgardeners have never had great love for one another. Over the centuries, they have fought border wars beyond count, and raided back and forth across mountains and marches, even when at peace. The Thoughts of Tyrion Lannister, A Storm of Swords, Chapter 19. Tyrion 3. House Manwoody of Kingsgrave is a minor noble house from Kingsgrave in northern Dorne as part of the lower foothills of the Red Mountains. Their seat is placed at the bottom of the Prince's Pass, guarding access to Dorne, which in turn makes it a key defensive position for the Dornish. The location of their seat near the Red Mountains likely places them among the Stony Dornish, the people group of Dornish under the classification set out by King Daeron I Targaryen after his brief conquest of Dorne. The Manwoodies are said to blazon their banner with a white skull with a gold crown over a black field. Some speculate this might be because they were kings at some point in their history, but it seems their banner actually comes from a different source altogether. There is more evidence that actually suggests the banner and the name of their seat actually comes from the fact the early Manwoodies slew a king, hence the skull and crown on their banner, and the name of their seat, Kingsgrave. Given their location near the Red Mountains, The men of House Manwoody have often been known to raid into the Dornish marches, including parts of both the Reach and the Stormlands via the Prince's Pass. During their early years of prominence, while they were still a smaller house, they would often join forces with houses of similar size to raid together, or join the raiding parties of larger houses rather than lead their own, but in time the house grew large enough to raid independently. There once was a king, Oberyn, who claimed dominion over parts of the Red Mountains of Dorne during the time period where the Rhoynar refugees arrived in Dorne. While it's believed Manwoody Kingdom was one of the smaller petty kingdoms that made up Dorne before the Martell unification, it was still one of the few petty kingdoms that existed before Nymeria's wars. The Rhoynish warrior queen Nymeria and her husband Prince Mors Martell defeated King Oberyn with relative ease during Nymeria's war. After the war had come to an end, and Dorne as a whole was now under the control of House Martell and Nymeria, all the defeated kings who had bent the knee and gave up their crowns were sent to the far north, to the Wall, to join the Black Brothers of the Night's Watch, something that even after Dorne joined the Seven Kingdoms under House Targaryen would be a rare sight to see. It's believed these kings were given gold chains and fetters for the long journey by sea to Eastwatch, the easternmost castle of the Night's Watch. By all accounts, the Manwoodies became loyal bannermen to House Martell, fighting bravely against the might of House Targaryen during the First Dornish War. Along with the other houses that called the Prince's Pass home, their role in the defence of Dorne was vital, given how the Prince's Pass is arguably the quickest and most accessible way by land into Dorne. Thus why the bulk of Targaryen force and focus would be around the Prince's Pass. While we have no confirmation, there is some reason to suspect that Kingsgrave, much like all the other Dornish seats and castles, were burned by the dragon flames of House Targaryen during the First Dornish War, and especially during the Dragon's Wrath after the death of Queen Rhaenys Targaryen over Hellholt. The role of House Manwoody and their neighbours in the Red Mountains played in the defence of Dorne, most certainly an important factor as to why House Targaryen were unable to take and hold Dorne by force, with the Dornish joining the realm of the dragons via marriage instead. I am not one to boast, but there is royal blood in my veins. I'm descended from a princess. My father told me the tale when I was a tad of a lad. She was the fairest treasure of the Maiden Vault. Lord Oakenfist, the great admiral, lost his heart to her, though he was married to another. She gave their son the bastard name of Waters, in honour of his father, and he grew to be a great knight, as did his own son, who put the name long before the Waters, so men might know that he was not bastardly born himself. So I have a little dragon in me. Yes, I almost mistook you for Aegon the Conqueror, Rennifer Longwaters, and Jaime Lannister talking about Aelena Targaryen. A Feast for Crows, Chapter 8, Jaime 1. During the reign of King Daeron II Targaryen, around the years 184 to 109 AC, a Michael Manwoody was a knight of House Manwoody. In his early years, he studied at the Citadel in Oldtown, but it's not clear if his intent was actually to become a maester or not. He was a cultured man of great learning and wit. He attended Queen Elia Martell at her court after her marriage to King Daeron, later serving King Doran at court. He became a great confidant of the king. On several occasions, he was sent to Braavos to negotiate on behalf of the Iron Throne to the Iron Bank of Braavos. There are letters recorded of correspondence between him and the keyholder of the bank. While it was Michael's name on the seal of the letters, the handwriting actually appears to belong to Princess Aelena Targaryen. Michael and Aelena were wed with the blessing of King Daeron II shortly after the death of Aelena's previous husband. Their marriage was one of love. According to Princess Aelena, she had fallen in love with Michael because of his passion for music, not his intelligence. Michael would often play the harp for her. When Michael died, Aelena commanded that his effigy be made carrying a harp instead of a sword and spurs, which was commonly used for knights' effigies. Aelena and Michael had no children together that we know of. During the events of A Storm of Swords, the Lord of Kingsgrave is Lord Dagos. His younger brother, Sir Miles Manwoody, and his two sons, Mors and Dickon, are part of the entourage of nobles who travelled with Prince Oberyn Martell when he came to King's Landing to claim the seat Tyrion Lannister had offered the Prince of Dorne, Doran Martell, on the small council, as well as to represent House Martell at the wedding of King Joffrey Baratheon to Marjorie Tyrell. Miles and his sons seem to be quite friendly with Oberyn, as they were among the first of his entourage he introduced to Tyrion Lannister when he meets the party outside of the gates of King's Landing. After Joffrey Lannister is assassinated at his own wedding feast in what became known as the Purple Wedding, Tyrion Lannister is arrested and accused of his murder. Oberyn is part of the trial of Tyrion, whom in the end is found guilty, but demands instead a trial by combat. As the dwarf struggles to find a man willing to fight, Oberyn volunteers himself, but the Red Viper has ulterior motives, as he wants to face Sir Gregor Clegane, the champion for the crown, the man who had murdered his young sister Elia and her children during the sack of King's Landing at the end of Robert's Rebellion. On the day of the trial, we know that Lord Dagos is present to witness, having travelled to King's Landing at some point after hearing news of the trial. However, it is also assumed that as the other Dornish nobles who travelled with Oberyn are also present, it suggests that Sir Miles and his sons were too there. Oberyn loses his fight with Sir Gregor, which comes as a huge shock to the Dornish. Dagos is later present at the feast held at Sunspear when Sir Balon Swan arrives to deliver the head of the mountain, Sir Gregor, as a peace offering to Doran Martell after his brother's death. Like many of the Dornish lords, he refuses to drink when Ricassio raises a toast to King Tommen. House Alaron of God's Grace is a major Dornish noble house from God's Grace, which sits near the confluence of the Scourge and the Vaith into the Greenblood River. Their blazon is a golden hand on red and black. Their words have not appeared in the books, but according to some semi-canon sources, they are, "No foe may pass." House Alaron are primarily of Andal descent, being founded by an adventurer coming from Andalos to Dorne around the same time the other Andal Dornish houses were founded, the likes of House Martell included. In fact, prior to Mors Martell's marriage to Nymeria, and then the unification of Dorne under House Martell were in fact vassals to House Alaron. During the First Dornish War after Aegon's conquest, God's Grace was one of the first castles Queen Rhaenys Targaryen stopped at with her dragon Meraxes, only to find House Alaron had fled, leaving the castle deserted. During the events of A Storm of Swords, Sir Ryan Alaron and his bastard son, Sir Daemon Sand, are among the Dornish nobles whom accompany Oberyn Martell to King's Landing for the wedding of Joffrey Baratheon to Marjorie Tyrell. It is believed that at least Daemon Sand helps Oberyn don his armour before his duel against Sir Gregor Clegane in the trial by combat for Tyrion Lannister. During a feast for crows when the Sand Snakes, the bastard daughters of Oberyn, are arrested by Prince Doran Martell, Prince of Dorne, Daemon too is arrested by men in service to Doran for demanding their release. In the Winds of Winter sample chapters, after Daemon is released, he comes from God's Grace to Sunspear to be part of Princess Elia Martell's party sent by her father, Prince Doran, to meet with Aegon Targaryen and Jon Connington. He is named Arianne's sworn shield. House Gargallen of Salt Shore is one of the minor Dornish noble houses, who hail from their seat of Salt Shore, located along the Summer Sea on the southern coast of Dorne. Their blazon is a red cockatrice with black snakes on gold. In his youth, Doran Martell, the now Prince of Dorne, squired for Lord Gargallen. When he was 9 years of age, Doran was at Salt Shore when Lord Gargallen gave him the news that his mother had given birth to his infant sister, Elia. During the events of A Storm of Swords, a Lord Tredmond Gargallen is among the Dornish nobles that accompanied Oberyn Martell to King's Landing for the wedding of Joffrey Baratheon to Marjorie Tyrell. Oberyn later explains to Tyrion Lannister that Lord Gargallen once said that he hoped to die with a sword in his hand, and Oberyn replied he would sooner prefer to die with a breast in his. During the Dornish visit to King's Landing, a fight at Fleabottom's pot shop leaves one Tyrell man-at-arms dead and 2 Gargallen men scalded. It's not clear if Lord Gargallen was present at Oberyn's duel with Gregor Clegane. However, given the other Dornish houses who travelled with Oberyn were present, suggests he likely was. House Jourdain of the Tor, one of the principal and noble houses in Dorne. The Tor is situated on the southern coast of the Sea of Dorne. Their blazon is a golden quill on checkered dark and light green. Their words have yet to appear in the books, but some sources say they are "Let it be written." House Jourdain was founded during the coming of the Andals. At some point, House Martell bent the knee to the Jourdain kings of the Tor for some unknown period of time, but by the time of Nymeria's wars, House Jourdain was among the bannermen of King Yorick Yronwood, and later fought against Lord Mors Martell and his Rhoynar allies on behalf of their king. It is assumed that when House Yronwood bent the knee, so did House Jourdain. During the first years of the First Dornish War, King Aegon Targaryen captured several Dornish castles, including Tor, whose steward surrendered the castle peacefully to Aegon, a short time after the death of Lord Jourdain. But the Dornishmen quickly recaptured the castle in Aegon's absence after he returned to King's Landing. In 8 AC, Queen Visenya Targaryen, mounted on Vhagar, burnt Sunspear, Lemonwood, Ghost Hill and Tor in retaliation for the Dornishmen's raiding against the Stormlanders earlier that year. The extent of the damage done to the Tor is not clear. Later during the Fourth Dornish War in 83 AC, Prince Moran Martell assembled his host at Ghost Hill and Tor before sailing to Cape Wrath, where he is defeated by King Jaehaerys Targaryen and his sons before a single Dornish ship reached the shores of Cape Wrath. House Santagar of Spotswood is a house of landed knights from Spotswood in Dorne and are sworn directly to House Martell. Technically, in canon, their motto and arms do not appear in the text, but there is some semi-canon sources that suggest they blazon their arms with a spotted leopard with a golden axe over Per Bensinster blue and white field. Like many of the houses sworn directly to House Martell, House Santagar descend from the same group of Andal adventurers. During his conquest of Dorne, King Daeron I Targaryen, the Young Dragon, remarked that the Knights of Spotswood stabled his sandsteed in his own hall, rather than in a stable. During the events of the main book series, Sir Aron Santagar is the Master-at-Arms at the Red Keep in King's Landing. When Catelyn Stark and Sir Roderick Cassel go to King's Landing in search of the owner of the Valyrian steel dagger used by the Caxpaw who attempted to kill Bran Stark, Roderick visits Aron, who, as Master-at-Arms at the castle, might recognise the dagger. The two knights then drink in the common room of an old inn on Eel Alley, where Catelyn and Roderick are staying. Aron is later part of the retinue which attends Princess Marcella Baratheon's departure for Dorne, and he and Sir Balon Swan bear King Joffrey's banner. When the riots in King's Landing break out, Tyrion Lannister sees Aron pulled from his saddle by small folk who tear away the Baratheon banner. 4 men use cobblestones to crush his head within his helmet. Silva Santagar is a childhood friend of Princess Arianne Martell. They spent many years in the Water Gardens together, usually a group of 5, along with Tyene Sand, Garin, and Andridolt. Because of her freckles, Silva received the nickname Spotted Silva. Her friends like to pretend that the nickname comes from the fact she's the heir to Spotswood, as the Santagar sigil is a spotted leopard. Princess Arianne Martell invites Silva to be one of her co-conspirators to crown Princess Marcella Baratheon, the Queen of Westeros. During their travels, they are intercepted by Areo Hotah on the Greenblood. Silva is among those captured, though Doran Martell, the Prince of Dorne, decides not to punish Silva for her role in the conspiracy. She's sent home to her father. Her father quickly betroths her to the aged Lord Eldon Estamont. Sylvia is sent to Greenstone and Lord Eldon to be married soon after. House Toland of Ghost Hill play quite an important role in the history of Dorne, especially during the First Dornish War with House Targaryen. The Toland banner was said to have once depicted a ghost. At some point, however, this changed to the current arms, which now depict a green dragon biting its tail on gold, the dragon symbolising that time has no beginning and no end. House Toland successfully resisted the dragons of Aegon the Conqueror during the First Dornish War, but they did not fight in the traditional sense. Lord Toland sent out a champion to face Aegon in single combat. After Aegon slew the man with ease, he learned that this man was actually the Toland's mad fool, and that Lord Toland had used it as a distraction to escape. In later days, the Tolands would take a new banner, showing a dragon biting its own tail, with the colours green and gold in memory of the motley of their brave fool. The Dornishmen quickly recaptured Ghost Hill after Aegon left Dorne and returned to King's Landing, having thought the war in Dorne over. In 8 AC, Queen Visenya Targaryen mounted her dragon Vhagar, burning multiple seats in Dorne, including Ghost Hill, in retaliation for the Dornishmen raiding the Stormlands earlier that year. During the dragon's wrath after the death of Queen Rhaenys Targaryen, Lady Torland was murdered for the Iron Throne's ransom on her head. During the Winds-of-Winter sample chapters, Elia Martell and her retinue stay at Ghost Hill on the way to Storm's End. They eat supper with Lady Toland and her daughters. Valena Toland shares reports of Rainhouse, Crow's Nest, Mistwood, Greenstone and Tarth falling to the Golden Company. House Vaith of Red Dunes is a Dornish noble house with their seat also named Vaith, placed on the river of the same name. West of Vaith are the deeper sand dunes of Dorne. The head of House Vaith has the title Lord of the Red Dunes. Neither their arms nor their words have appeared in books, but according to some semi-canon sources, their arms are a shield with 3 black leopards standing on a yellow pile of oranges. The Vaiths were adventuring Andals who settled the hills east of the deep dunes and sands of Dorne. The nearby river took their name. During the Wars of Conquest, Queen Rhaenys Targaryen flew upon her dragon Meraxes to Vaith, but found the castle abandoned. During the First Dornish War that followed, Lord Harlan Tyrell and his army marched from Hellholt to capture Vaith, but they disappeared somewhere in the sands, never to be seen again. During the Dragon's Wrath after the death of Queen Rhaenys Targaryen, Lord Vaith was among the lords murdered for the Iron Throne's ransom on his head. In 158 AC, after the submission of Sunspear during the conquest of Dorne by King Daeron I, Cassella Vaith was one of the hostages sent to King's Landing, as she was the daughter of Lord Vaith. She was escorted by the then Prince Aegon Targaryen, later King Aegon IV, known as Aegon the Unworthy. He kept Cassella as a hostage in his own private chambers. After the Dornishmen revolted and killed King Daeron I Targaryen, all the hostages were to be killed. Aegon, by then bored of her, returned Cassella to her place with the other prisoners. The new king, Baelor I Targaryen, pardoned all the hostages and personally took them back to Dorne. Cassella never wed or had any children, and in her old age was consumed by the delusion she had been Aegon's one true love, and that he would soon send for her. Sir Duncan the Tall met an aged Lady Vaith, and spoke to her with such lack of grace he put his own life and Egg's, his squire, in danger. According to Egg, Lady Vaith was mad, so it's unclear if the danger could have been avoided, but that Duncan could have been more gallant. During the events of A Feast for Crows, Elia Martell plans to cross the Dornish deserts with Myrcella Baratheon to crown her queen via Vaith, but they are intercepted on the Greenblood by Arya Hotar.